Their work will be remembered as one of the greatest moments of this planet.
Mr. Scout. I know you're still weighing whether to return to Lumen. But the Mark I've come to know is happy.
Hello, is anyone there? Is the board on? It's Marquez from Macro...
What you all did was one of the most painful moments in the history of this company.
What the hell?
But the four of you have become known as the face of Severance reform.
Okay, so we're not in trouble?
I don't think so. Milchick said we're famous.
All of us equally, or one of us is like the star?
Now if you feel that you can't go on.
So what the hell did you guys see up there?
It's not our world up there.
And your life is filled with much confusion.
My Audi's wife died a few years ago. Except the woman is Miss Casey.
So what are you gonna do?
I gotta get her out of here.
Mark, your Annie said she's alive.
This is obscene.
I just want to be sure.
And your world around is coming down.
Why did you do this? What is this all about?
Do you know something about Gemma?
Mark, there'll be no honeymoon ending for you.
Their work will be remembered as one of the greatest moments of this planet.
You don't value them. You fear them. We fear no one.
I'm tightening the leash.
If we let this happen to Miss Casey, who's gonna step up when it happens to us?
Now. Goodbye, Marquez.
Wait!
My name is Miss Huang. It's my first day here as deputy manager. Mark W.
Why are you a child?
Because of when I was born.
So much had happened in only the first 4 episodes, and now it's hard to believe that here we are getting ready to dive into the final 3. Are you ready for the final 3 episodes of Severance season 2, Cowbell PM?
Oh my God. I can't believe that we are at the final 3. I don't know what we're
Crazy.
gonna do when it's like all done, right? It's time to rewatch. But that's the amazing thing about Severance. They always impress me with the fact that they just give us the information. We are so used
Yeah,
to having shows that make us wait to give us any information as to what could possibly be happening, that
yeah.
it's so refreshing that Severance does surprise you. You walk into an episode and suddenly they just have changed everything for you. They gave you all of the answers. I mean, like what happened with Gemma, right? I think that now we have a handle on what her life has been like. And it was
Yeah.
all in one episode.
They do tend to do that, and that is one thing. You're 100% right. That is one thing that I do very much appreciate about Severance, where they keep the suspense going, but they don't drag things out to the point where you're waiting 2-3 seasons to get actual answers. I love it's one of my favorite shows of all time. I love the slow burn mystery aspect. Me personally, I don't mind waiting for answers sometimes, especially if the show and the quality of the story is good enough, and just getting into the characters is rewarding enough on From. But that was one sentiment I saw from a lot of the people in the chat when From was on, that they wanted some more answers a little bit quicker, and I totally understand that sentiment. And I think Severance has found a really good balance where they don't give everything away. They keep the bigger overarching mysteries still intact in terms of what Lumen really is, what the heck's going on with this company, the goats, Cold Harbor. But they also slowly along the way give us some really good nuggets of information that do give us some of those smaller answers. Like you said, finding out about what happened to Gemma in the span of one episode, pretty much. One whole episode, we pretty much learned almost everything that happened to Gemma in the 5 years that her and Mark were together to up to the accident. And I do like how Severance is handling the flow of information up until this point. The pacing of the show has been very pleasing for me up until this point because, again, we're getting some good stuff, but they're not giving away too much, and it just feels like it's a nice, steady pace. Someone said this in the comment section today during my when I uploaded my episode 8 predictions and preview video. Someone said they haven't found a single episode of Severance yet that has been filler. We've gotten at least something in every single episode, and that's true. I actually 100% agree with that. It's you look at every single episode that we've ever gotten, and I can't think of one episode that could be, called quote unquote filler. We've gotten something pretty big, or the plot has at least progressed in just about every episode so far. So yeah, there's not much filler in Severance. I do appreciate they're allocating their screen time very wisely.
Oh, for sure. And I totally agree. I don't think that any of the episodes could be called filler. And also what I like about the episodes and the show Severance itself is that you could watch them individually and they kind of focus on a theme, right? And we've talked
Yeah.
about this before, but they will go with a theme and then introduce the theme through all of our characters. So if
Yes.
you were watching just one episode, it is very satisfying because there's the beginning of the story and the end, even though we have a continuous story and we still have more to develop. I think that every episode does give you that satisfaction where you can see the beginning and the end of that specific theme play out with everyone.
hmm You can, and it is satisfying. It's a satisfying way of storytelling, especially today in today's day where TV has become just as popular as films, if not even more so nowadays. It seems like people get more excited for television shows than they do for films these days. And I think that's the convenient access that we have to television shows, whether it's on network cable or on one of the streaming services. We get that, with some of these shows like Severance, we get that really good cinematic feature length film quality every single week right from our couch or right from our wherever we are. So I think that's why so many people have been gravitating towards television over these last few years, because you're getting that same quality that you get in the theater, but you're getting it right at home and you're getting it new every single week. And for people who like the longer format of serialized storytelling, it's I feel like we are in the age of the golden age of television. Not so much in all of the content, but at least in terms of how much we're getting and the format of it and the accessibility of it. It's everywhere, and it seems to just be getting more and more popular every year. And we see it also reflected in some of the cinema box offices. Some really, really big budget movies that would have done so well a few years ago are doing barely half of what they would now. People just aren't going to the theater as much as they used to these days. And I do think streaming is a big reason for that. People can just wait in whatever film that you want to watch. Even Nosferatu. Nosferatu,
Yeah.
hugely anticipated film that everybody wanted to see. And even though it did okay in the box office, a movie like that would have done so much better a few years ago in the box office if it was released a few years ago. But nowadays, people kind of know they don't really have to go to the theater. That if they skip the theater experience, that movie will most likely be uploaded on one of the numerous streaming services a few months later. And here we are now, a few months later, and I believe Nosferatu is already available free on Peacock. I believe one of the streaming services. It's already up and it's already free. So yeah, you don't have to wait too long. Like, you don't have to rush out to the theater to see a film, because back in the day, that's how it was. There was that sense of urgency
Yeah.
where if you didn't go to the movie theater and see it, you had to wait 6 months before it was out on DVD or Blu-ray.
Yeah.
That's just how it was. But now it's different.
It definitely is. And it kind of makes me think, are we happy about it? Sometimes I'm happy about it because it's so much more convenient and it's so much more comfortable, right? To get to
Yeah,
see excellent television shows or movies at home. But in a way, when you recall that having to wait, right? The anticipation, it kind
yeah,
of makes me remember how great going to the movie theater used to be. Of course,
yeah,
I haven't gone, I say that, but of course, Totally a hypocrite because all I do is watch shows like from home. And I have
Yeah.
not gone out to the theater. But I do remember that being like such a big part, right, of the
Mhm.
weekend.
It was one of those things that it was an event, you know what I mean? It was something you would plan with a bunch of your friends. You'd get together in a big group. You would all go to the movie theater for the night, and you'd see one or even two movies back to back. Like it became an event. It was something that you would plan towards all week. And yeah, I mean, I think you're right. There's some pluses there and there's some negatives about the quick accessibility of TV and films these days through streaming. Where yes, you do have that convenience of just being able to sit at home and not have to go out, and it's much more convenient. Especially nowadays where time is super precious. You can watch a movie while you're doing something around the house. It's not like it's wasted time. um, but yeah, back in the day, it was one of those things where it was a big event that you and your friends kind of all planned for all week. It's like, okay, all week you're waiting for Friday or Saturday to come around because you know you're going to go to the movie theater. And yeah, I don't know, it's different nowadays. It's just different. But again, there's positives and negatives to that. There are some positives, but yeah, we had an interesting question, and this is definitely something that we could kick the festivities off with, because I suppose usually I try not to judge whether a season one or a season two is better until the whole season is done. But even though we are pretty close into season two, there's 3 episodes left. Yeah, so it's hard to get a full picture. But at least up until now, I suppose we could at least ask what the chat thinks, and I'm interested to know what you think as well. Up until this point, where we are, Severance season one or season two, which is better? What do you guys think in the chat? Do you think season one was better? Did you enjoy season one more? Are you enjoying season two more than you enjoyed season one? Or is it one of those things where, kind of like me, where you want to wait to see season two as a whole before you fully judge it? That's where I'm kind of at right now. But up until this point, just where we are, up until episode 7 of season two versus all of season one, it's hard to judge. I must say, I do feel like I'm probably enjoying season two just as much as I enjoyed season one. What about you?
Hmm. Well, it's difficult, right? Because I don't want to say
Mhm.
anything. I feel like we have all been burned by sort of like shows that are going amazing, right? They're great all the way till the end. They do something that just doesn't make sense, and then you can't stand by that season of that specific show. But I'm going to be hopeful and have faith in Severance. I think that season two is the best one out of the ones that they've had
Ooh.
because it's given us so many iconic moments, right? I'm gonna
Yeah.
kill a Mr. Milkshake. All of the like marshmallows are for winners. It's iconic in itself, just with what they have done. Even if I don't think that they would ruin it, I don't want to like say that or put that out there. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think season two for sure.
Season two. All right. I like it. I like it. And yeah, I mean, season two has been super exciting. I will say I like the pacing of season two a little bit better than season one. Season one, the first 3 episodes or so were pretty much, they were good, but they were pretty much all kind of character development and world building, which shows should focus time on and get those things right. There's nothing worse than jumping into a story too soon and you have no idea who the characters are, what world it's set in, where it's set in, the time period. You want to establish very firmly your characters, their motivations, who they are as people, and of course, the world that the story is set in. Once you can establish those things, then you can take the story anywhere you want. But I do see some shows jumping the shark every once in a while where they'll dive super deep into story before they take the time to proper develop the characters in that story and the world that it's set in. And sometimes it can be a little bit jarring when you're trying to do one before the other. So I do like that about Severance season one. They took the time to develop these characters, let you know that what this world of Severance is, this severed program, what it's like living with it. They did a really good job at showcasing all of that. But it was a little bit slow during those first 3 episodes. I feel like around episode 4 on in season one, the pacing really started to pick up. Like when we finally saw Helly and Helena just starting to go to absolute war, which I believe was episode 4. From that point on, season one just started to get better and better and better. But up until this point, I will say the pacing of season 2, I have definitely enjoyed more because I feel like we're getting something pretty big every episode. So I got to give season 2 it for the pacing for sure. But once they're done, once season 2 is completely done and over, and then I can kind of judge them a little bit more accurately, then I'll be able to tell which one I like a little bit better, for sure.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, it's they're both good though. I mean, if you like season 1 better, if you like season 2 better, or if you like both of them equally, that is totally fine. As Danny Spanks, I enjoy seasons equally. Sorry, had to. Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. Never apologize for giving us your opinion, my friend. It is welcome. Xavier Anderson as well. I enjoy them both equally. The perfect balance in a show like this. And it is. I can understand people saying like that. Vanessa as well. Both are good. They really are. Both seasons are solid. It's good quality storytelling. That's one thing that we do also tend to see sometimes where a season will come out and season 1 will be so phenomenal. It'll be so well written. The world, the characters, everything that it sets up is just so richly done. And then season 2 will come around and it drops the ball a little bit. And I feel like that did recently happen a little bit with House of the Dragon. I thought this first season was pretty decent for the most part. And then season 2, in my opinion, dropped the ball a little bit. I think it's because they deviated from the source material a lot in season 2. And I think it kind of, I don't know, maybe it's because I'm a book fan at heart. So maybe it's just a little bit of my bias because I always prefer the books to the shows. Like the books are always better. But I felt season 2 of House of the Dragon kind of fell into that territory where they put so much into season 1 and it was so well. And then season 2 came around and it was just not as good. At least the second half of season 2. The first 4 episodes of season 2 were pretty good. It was more the second half of season 2. But Severance, season 1 was phenomenal. They had a really good format that they kind of fell into a really interesting format towards midway through that first season, and it was a nice, steady, refreshing story every week. And I do feel like season 2 picked up right where season 1 left off, not just in terms of storytelling, but in terms of story quality and production quality. The cinematography is just as good. The shots, the dynamic camera angles are just as good. So I do feel like quality-wise, yeah, they're right there neck and neck with each other. For sure.
Yeah. Now, just briefly, right, for the audience, because we all want to know. You know, everybody loves House of the Dragon. Are we hopeful for season 3 then? I know you said like season 2 wasn't like super amazing, but are we hopeful?
I'm a little nervous. I always try to stay hopeful, especially if something is set in the world of A Song of Ice and Fire. I again, it could just be my bias because I love that world so much. I love the book so much, but I have my reservations for season 2. As much as I want to go into it saying, season 3 is going to be so great, it's going to completely make up for season 2. As much as I want that to happen, I don't know if it will. So I'm cautiously, super cautiously, a little bit optimistic, I guess, but I'm not super excited. Yeah.
Okay.
One thing I am super excited for, though, one thing that I've heard from all of my contacts at HBO, and everybody I have ever talked to has said how much they love A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, the next Game of Thrones spinoff that'll be starting in a few months. Everybody that I've talked to, even George R.R. Martin himself, has been praising it. And it looks like they have stayed incredibly faithful to the Dunk and Egg stories, the Dunk and Egg source material, these beautiful, beautiful novellas that are set in the A Song of Ice and Fire world that are, they're much smaller and much more self-contained. It's not this giant, big, sprawling, epic adventure that Game of Thrones was. It's much more of a buddy cop kind of dramedy set in Westeros with these two characters that just have such an endearing dynamic. I think people are going to fall in love with Egg in particular, Dunk too, but more so Egg, just because of his age, his wit, his wisdom, the kid is a toddler, but he's smarter than everybody around him. He's always the smartest person in any room he steps in. And even though he grew up a Targaryen, he grew up kind of in disguise as just your average squire. Like, he wanted to see the world. He didn't want to grow up pampered in the castle. And it really helped him in the long run become a better ruler, I feel, because he got in touch with the common people, which is something sometimes royalty loses sight of, who they're actually ruling and the struggles that of the people that they're actually ruling go through. But I think I'm super hopeful for A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. Again, everybody I've talked to, all of my contacts have praised it so much. So I can't wait to see that. It's going to be good.
Very exciting. And I see a Severance connection there. I can't recall what Mr. Milkshake said, but he said that Elena, apparently he made it up. We know he made it up, but he said Elena did just that, right? And Kier used to just pretend to be one of the regular people so that they could rule better.
Yeah, pretty much. And that's a very good point. That is exactly the excuse that Milchick does try giving to them when they uncover Helena. She's, have you ever heard of the of course I'm gonna butcher it, so I'm not even gonna try it. But yes, that's exactly what the excuse that they use. She's going undercover to better understand her people. And even though it was kind of a bullshit excuse, you get what they were going for, and that is similar to Egg and Duncan Egg as well. I see people calling for a poll, and which anytime the chat wants a poll, I am always down for a poll. Absolutely. Let's see.
Of course. The chat that knows all will tell us what season was best, season 1 or season 2. And I saw a lot of people saying like it was pretty even. So
yeah. Is season 2 better than season 1? You guys can let us know in the chat on the official poll. What do you guys think? Is season 2 better than season 1? If you think season 2 is better, go ahead and click that yes. If you think season 1 is better, then go ahead and click that no. And you guys can let your answers be heard. And so far, it's looking a little even. We got 56%. Oh, wow. Now 50-50 even, back up to 56. Now down to 45. Okay, it's jumping all over the place. All right, we'll let that stew for a few minutes. But it seems close. Is season 2 better than season 1? 62% so far are saying no. So it seems like season 1 has the edge. Season 1 has the edge up until this point. Interesting. 60-40, 58-42. Yeah, season 1 is has a slight lead. They have it perfectly timed, so you get the answers exactly when you can't wait any longer. And it does kind of have that feeling, doesn't it? So I do agree with you there, TJ. They're not drawing it out too much, and that is something that can get a little bit annoying for audiences sometimes, where they make you wait a little bit too long. And then there's also giving answers too quickly and not letting the mystery stew. So I do feel like you said, they found the perfect medium there. It is that perfect kind of mix where you're getting the answers when you want them, not too fast, not too slow. So I do agree with you. Again, I really think they found a really good pacing here, a very winning formula for this show, for sure. So what will happen with Cobel? What discoveries will she make? Yes, let's dive into this a little bit, shall we? Now we know episode 8, of course, just a few days away. And anyone who has seen the preview, the very limited preview for episode 8, if you haven't, it is uploaded on my channel. The most recent video that I uploaded today, the beginning of it is the episode 8 preview plus my breakdown of it. Actually, I should say PM and I's breakdown of it, because she was super instrumental in crafting this video with me. It doesn't give us much, but the little bit we do get is, yes, Cobel will be making her return in episode 8. That much seems to be very clear. We are finally going to find out what is up with Cobel. Where has she been these last few episodes? Now, again, the last time we saw Cobel, she was fleeing for her life in sheer terror, running away from Helena and her bodyguard, which, again, super mysterious. We still don't quite know exactly what spooked her off. There's a lot of great fan theories behind it, of course, but in terms of what we really know, not much yet. But that was the last time we saw Cobel. We have no idea where she has been since. And hopefully in this next episode, we will find out a little bit where she's been over these last few days, weeks, however much time has passed. But also, it also looks like we're going to be maybe diving into some of the past even a little bit more. We look at the episode title of season 2 of episode 8, and of course, it is entitled Sweet Vitriol. And for those who don't know, sweet vitriol is actually a nickname for what they used to call diethyl ether. And diethyl ether, of course, is made by mixing ether with sulfuric acid. And one thing we do see in season 1 is Kier himself in a very specific painting of Kier when he first met his dearly beloved wife, Imogen. And the first time we see him, he's kind of standing over this big vat, stirring it, and that invoked a lot of similar feelings. When I saw the title "Sweet Vitriol," and I thought, okay, it's sweet vitriol means diethyl ether. Diethyl ether is only made by mixing ether and sulfuric acid. We have this painting of Kier mixing ether. It kind of made me think of that painting, I guess. So I'm wondering if the title is in any way a hint to something that we're going to learn about Kier in his early days, something that has to do with the ether factory, something that could potentially have to do with him and his wife Imogen and how they met, their origins, or is it going to be maybe a little bit more closely tied to Cobel? Could we learn a little bit more about Cobel's backstory? I'm hoping we get some interesting history on Cobel because there's still a lot of questions surrounding her, who she is, where she came from. Now, of course, we do know a little bit, and the little bit we do know is at least a little bit intriguing. We know that she went to the school, the Myrtle Eagan School for Girls, as a child, and based on the hospital bracelet that we see in her shrine that she has in her house, the shrine that she has dedicated to Kier and Lumon, she has this hospital bracelet in there marked Charlotte Cobel. And of course, we know her name is Harmony Cobel, and we know that she's certainly not 80-something years old. So this clearly must be from her mother. So PM and I were talking, and I'm sure many other people have probably come to a similar conclusion that obviously Cobel, when she was a child, her mother died. And then it seems like after that, she got sent to the Myrtle Eagan School for Girls, and which led us to believe that this wasn't really a school at all, that it was probably most likely an orphanage, that Cobel was raised in a Lumon Eagan ran orphanage. Because as you mentioned in our discussions, a lot, especially back in the day, most of the orphanages that were around, very rarely did they have the word orphanage in the title. It was always referred to as a school or, as you mentioned, even a boarding school. So I think we're going to find out that the Myrtle Eagan School for Girls wasn't just a private school for girls. I think this was an orphanage for girls specifically.
Oh yeah. I think that it's, potentially it seems like it would make sense and it would fit what we know about not only Cobel but Miss Huang, right? We have all been asking ourselves, where are her parents? Why are they okay with this, right? And so I've seen a lot of theories where we have gone multiple directions. Maybe the parents are fanatics themselves, but this kind of like fits both situations. The really interesting thing about boarding schools or orphanages historically during that time is that yes, they were called just schools, but they often focused on civilizing, quote unquote, or bettering the children that were in these orphanages, whether it was through religion or it was through federal government sort of conversion into what a perfect citizen of the state would be. And we get a lot of that language with Kier. A lot of the language with Kier is the bettering of humanity, the bettering of his quote unquote children, right? So it kind of seems to fit. I think maybe. I think like it might be that.
I think it could be. I'm definitely leaning a little more in that direction. Again, after our discussion and after you brought that up, it kind of just clicked with me, and I thought it would make a little bit more sense. And like you said, even so far as Mini Milkshake as well with Miss Wong, we have no idea where she came from. We know the only thing we heard from Milkshake in the most recent episode, or episode 6, is you cannot pass this fellowship without my approval. And that leads me to believe that she is in some sort of internship program, that maybe she was sent to Lumen, to the Severed program in this managerial position because she was maybe a honor student or something at the Myrtle Eagan School. I wouldn't be surprised if Miss Huang came from there as well. Because again, how else does a child this young become a high level manager, high level mid manager at least, in the most classified floor that Lumen has, the Severance floor, where their most precious and secretive work is happening? You would think that wouldn't be a position they would trust a child with, but for some reason they did. So I do think they both went to the Myrtle Eagan School. I do think the school was more of an orphanage kind of boarding school kind of thing, and not just this private school for girls. And that is one thing I'm hoping to learn maybe a little bit more about in this next episode. Are we going to finally learn a little bit more about Cobel's origins, a little bit more about her background, some of the things that she went through? Because there's also a lot of these theories going around as well. As Minky brings up, Cobel is a love child of Charlotte and James Eagan. And a lot of people do seem to think that Cobel is secretly an Eagan, or maybe secretly half Eagan. A lot of people do have those theories that she has Eagan blood inside of her. So I guess that's another question I'll ask you, PM, and everybody in the chat. What do you guys think? Do you think there's a possibility that Miss Cobel is secretly an Eagan, or maybe even secretly half of an Eagan? Do you think that's a possibility, that she does hail from that line in some way? What about you, PM? Is there a possibility she's got some Eagan blood?
Well, Minky, I kind of thought the same thing, right? And the reason why I think a lot of us started with that theory was because of the obsession. What we have seen in shows, right, is that whenever you have somebody obsessed with a family who isn't actually part of the family, it later turns out that their obsession is because they are indeed an illegitimate child. And so they have been obsessed with the legacy of the family because it is their family that was denied to them. So that makes a lot of sense with Cobel and the way that she has fixated upon what a Kier meant to the world, right? She has a very specific fixation where it goes beyond the company, to the point where sometimes she disagrees with the board, but has this loyalty and love for Kier at the same time. So I could definitely see as to why people think that. And I think potentially it could be that as well. If not the boarding school, there's something that has happened to Miss Cobel to the point where she feels like a child of Kier. So if it's not that she's an actual child of Kier, it has to be, for me, that it's an orphanage. And without parents, she was therefore a child of Kier, literally.
Yeah, I mean, right from the very beginning, that's something they do make very clear to showcase to us, how deeply invested she is in Kier, and Lumen too, but specifically Kier. It seems like she's specifically following the doctrine of Kier. And I know there was a theory going around during season 1 that Cobel was secretly rebelling against Lumen, that she thought that they have strayed a little bit too far from Kier's original vision. And I always thought that was an interesting storyline, that you would have this one character, Cobel, that was just this die-hard Kier purist, to the point where she would even be willing to rebel against Lumen if she thought they were not following Kier's doctrine. I thought that was an interesting storyline. I was kind of sad that that didn't kind of come to fruition. It still could, it very much still could. It certainly isn't a debunked theory by any means. They could definitely still go that direction. But I remember when I first saw that theory, and I wish I could remember who I saw say it first so I could give them credit. But I loved that theory when I first saw it, that Cobel was not happy with Lumen because they were, straying from the path. They weren't following the absolute law, the handbook of Kier, the Bible of Kier, as she kind of looks at it. And that was one thing that they definitely established super early on. She is so loyal to Kier and the Eagan name. And I think that's why it hit her so hard when she had this position ripped away from her. And we've talked a little bit about this in terms of it's a complete paradigm shift, where she had settled into this position as being the head of the Severed floor. it wasn't just her job. It was such a big part of her identity. It was who she was. It's not like she was Harmony Cobel, manager at the Severed Floor. She was her job. It wasn't a title for her. It was a way of life for her. So when that got ripped away from her, we saw how badly it affected her. I mean, it got to the point where she's fleeing. She's living in her freaking car. Like, she was not doing too well at the beginning of season 2.
No.
And still may not be. Like, and then of course we see her doing everything she can to try and get her job back, even to the point where Helena offers her a quote unquote promotion, which she wants nothing to do with. Because I feel like Cobel could kind of tell, yes, this might be a quote unquote promotion, but this is a way for you guys to just keep me in line and keep me out of the way because you don't want me on the Severed Floor. That's where she wants to be. She doesn't want a different job. She wants that job because she feels like it's such a big part of her identity. And it's going to be interesting to see, where has she grown to? Like, the last time we see her, when she flees away from Helena and the bodyguard, it seemed like she was going up to Helena that night to try and get her job back yet again. I wonder where her headspace is at right now. Do you think when we see Cobel return, do you think she's still going to be in that same headspace where she still wants to get that job back? Or do you think she's moved past it by now and now has a different objective?
I think the objective, that's an excellent question. And I would like the chat. Jeremy Sevis know all, right?
They do.
So
They
does
do.
Cobel want her job back, guys, or not? I think the objective is always the same. She's obsessed with Kier's legacy. And so that will always be her objective, whether it's by means of actually being employed at the Severance Floor or by other means. Maybe she has found a different way to get to that objective, right? I don't think
Yeah.
that she's looking for the job back because she kind of burned that bridge with Elena.
Yeah.
Um, they don't really need her. They have Mr. Milkshake, who is bettering himself to the point of forcing, and like you stated in your episode 8 preview, he is so committed to the company, Mr. Milkshake, that he is reprogramming himself. So there's no need for Miss Cobel. But I think that her aim of getting to Kier's legacy being done correctly is always going to be the same. It should just not need it there. But when you were talking about the way that she views the company, it made me think of Miss Huang, Mini Milkshake. Mini Milkshake also kind of has the same attitude of being obsessed sort of with what Kier stands for and seeing where the company is not following that and pointing it out. Like, she points out that Mr. Milkshake is not doing the paper clips correctly. And when she says you shouldn't let them have funerals, it makes them feel like people. So in that way, Mini Milkshake and Cowbell are very similar in the way that there has been something programmed into their mind where they only see Kier and what Kier stood for. And even if it's the company itself, they're going to point out that you're not following what Kier would have liked.
Yeah.
Right?
Maybe. No, I could totally see that. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Cobel's been another one of those characters where I feel like her motivations were pretty easy to suss out in season 1. Not easy, but we know that she was heavily invested in Mark for some reason. She had this obsession with Mark. We're not quite sure why, but someone said it in the chat. She's obsessed with Mark, and I totally agree with that. It seems like she has a very weird Pam Jam. She is obsessed with Mark, and she is. We definitely saw that. I feel to the point where at the beginning, I think a lot of us thought that maybe Lumen was like her getting so close to Mark, his outie life, his any life, literally becoming his neighbor and going as this Mrs. Selvig persona, even though she's not severed, or at least she isn't severed anymore. I know some people think she was severed at some point with the chip that she carries, which is a possibility, I suppose. But yes, that was one thing we saw super early on. At first, I thought this was just part of the job. She's keeping a close eye on Mark because for some reason, Mark is so important to Lumen. And then we find out that this wasn't at Lumen's behest. Her getting super close to Mark, her getting super close to Mark's sister and their baby. Like, it got really weird and really dark there for a minute. And then when we find out that this was not at Lumen's behest, that she did this all on her own, that gave us even more questions. Like, okay, we know that Lumen seems to have put a very high value on Mark. They're super invested in Mark finishing this Cold Harbor case, but why exactly is Cobel so invested in Mark? Why is she so obsessed with Mark? And no, I'll never accept the explanation that Milkshake gives us at the beginning of season 2, in the sense of she just wants a throuple with Mark. His outie, his innie, and her. I don't think that's the case. I don't think Miss Cobel is in love with Mark. There's something very different going on here. That was just, if anything was ever a stunk of a cover story, it was that. But yeah, why was she so invested in Mark? Why is she so obsessed with Mark? What is it about Mark that she is invested in? And is it just simply that she knows Mark is integral to Cold Harbor and she's still dedicated to Lumen and to what Kier is doing? Is that part of it? Or is there something else going on? Is there another part of Miss Cobel that hasn't been revealed yet as to why she was so closely, inserting herself into Mark's life, his personal life even? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, Pam Jam entertained this idea, right? And Jeremy, you and I were speaking about this, but could it potentially be that Miss Cowbell, yes, in fact, she was raised by Kier, by the orphanage or by the company, the corporation? However, could it potentially be that as she got older, she realized that maybe it wasn't the right thing to do, which is why we believe her to not be helping Mark. But what if she was trying to do the best that she could to help him? For example, we see that she steals the red candle that Gemma made herself from Mark's house, then takes it and places both of them in a room with the candle. There's absolutely no reason to do that unless she wanted to see if it could trigger a memory. When it doesn't trigger a memory, she gets really upset and she tells Mr. Milkshake, take her back to the testing floor, which he replies, you know, it's a good thing that they don't remember each other, but she's upset. Why is she upset if it's all going according to plan?
Very true. I mean, she did seem very angry there. You're right. I mean, yeah, we see something triggered her in that moment. She saw something there that she was not happy with, because she was like gritting her teeth to the point where she's like, get her back down to the testing room floor. Like, she was not happy. Yeah, like, what did she see that she didn't like there? I guess that's actually a really good question. I still don't know. But yeah, she was unhappy there. She definitely did not seem very happy. She was a little perturbed, I must say. And Consolar brings up that Cold Harbor will help Cobel's mom, in my opinion. Ooh, interesting. Like, that maybe Cobel's mom isn't really dead. That's interesting. Or maybe she is really dead and this will help her in some other way. Is Cold Harbor some way of bringing back people from the dead? I know resurrection has been a huge part of the show. Not of the show, but at least a huge part of the fan theories that have been attached to the show. There's so many theories out there about resurrection. And there are a lot of hints and foreshadowing to stuff like that happening in the show. So I know those theories aren't just being pulled out of thin air. People are seeing things in the show that do point a little towards a potential resurrection. I know a lot of people talk about cloning, all kinds of weird stuff that Lumen could be up to. And of course, we've dived so deep into it many times in terms of all of the really, really interesting parallels between Severance and Frankenstein. Not Frankenstein the monster, but Frankenstein the actual book, in some of the themes and some of the characteristic traits that Kier and Victor Frankenstein in particular share. There's a lot of similarities there. So I do totally understand why resurrection has become such a big fan theory among the Severance fandom. But I don't know. Yeah, could that be it? Could she be invested in this Cold Harbor thing because it has to do with her mom? Maybe. This is an interesting one. I think Lumen caused Gemma's miscarriage, and this was something we discussed a little bit as well. And I love Xavier. Xavier's always got great ideas. The whole chat always has freaking great ideas. This is why I love this chat. It really is the best. Like, you guys come up with the coolest shit. Xavier Anderson says, I think Lumen caused Gemma's miscarriage and promised her a chance at IVF or something similar. They have been watching Gemma and Mark both, and Dr. Morrow was at the fertility clinic. Exactly. And that was something we noticed as well, which kind of gave us instant red flags, right? I'm sure most of you as well.
Yeah.
Where, you know, we see Mark and Gemma long before the accident, long before anything even bad really starts happening in their marriage. We see, of course, Gemma has this horrific miscarriage. And then almost like 2 scenes later, we see her and Mark, yes, at the fertility clinic, as you mentioned, Xavier. And it's easy to miss. I know some people missed it. They had to go back and watch the episode and watch that scene again, and then they really catch it, because Severance can do that every once in a while, where they can throw something in the background that if you're not paying attention to the background and you're only watching the foreground, you will miss it. And that was one of those scenes where you kind of have to be looking in the background to see it. But yes, they walk past one of the rooms and we see the same creepy dentist. I don't even like to call him Dr. Maurer. I don't think he's earned his name, Dr. Maurer. He will always be creepy dentist for me. We see the creepy dentist walk right by Gemma and Mark, and not just walk right by them as he's staring right at Gemma. So you do get the sense that Gemma and Mark were being watched, that Lumen had them under some kind of surveillance for a long time, and just for some reason had a feeling that Mark and Gemma had the perfect kind of the perfect characteristics. They were the perfect mix, the perfect blend of what they needed or what they were looking for this Cold Harbor experiment, because it seems like it's very closely tied to both Mark and Gemma. We keep hearing Lumen saying they need Mark to finish Cold Harbor, that he's the only one that can apparently do that. And if Mark's emotional and personal connection to Gemma is why they need him so much, that would make so much sense as to why they're so invested in Mark, as to why they were literally surveilling Gemma and Mark years before the accident. And so I do tend to agree with you, Xavier. I wouldn't be surprised if Lumen set all of it up. The miscarriage, the accident, Mark eventually getting a job on the severed floor. I wouldn't be surprised if Lumen set all of these dominoes up just to get them both on the severed floor to work on this Cold Harbor project, because they knew they were the perfect couple for it.
I completely agree. Completely agree. And Xavier, Dr. Maurer will forever now be creepy dentist, right? Jeremy gives us the best names: mini milkshake, cowbell, and now creepy dentist. So when I was looking into the symbolism of the show and of Ether specifically after watching your episode 8 preview video, Ether has a sweet taste to it, right?
Yes, that's
And
why they
when
call
I
it the
look at
sweet
the
vitriol.
yes, and super toxic, super toxic.
Yes,
At some
yes.
point, somebody tasted it. You shouldn't, don't do it, but it's sweet. And the symbolism there completely fits what scenario you are describing, Xavier, where this is a super toxic company. It's a company that is not looking to better society or the world. However, it tastes sweet. It says all the right things. It says we want to make the world better. We want to work with everyone. We have seen it in the interviews that Lumen has done, right, to the public, where they keep telling the public, oh, we just want to make the world a better place.
Yeah.
We want to eradicate pain or whatever it may be. And we see it in our world too, where pharmaceutical companies will say, we just want to take care of your pain. We just want to take your pain away. But you look at the symbolism of ether and how sweet it is and yet toxic. And the scenario that you describe is just that, to cause a miscarriage, to then offer a helping hand, to then be the sweet person that just wants to help you, right? Without admitting that we are actually the entirety of your problem. So the symbolism does fit.
It does. It seems that it does fit a bit, and it's interesting. It's interesting when you kind of look a little bit deeper, and that's one thing I really do like about Severance, where you have this great kind of storyline playing off in the in the foreground, the main storyline. But then when you dive a little bit deeper, You have all this other interesting stuff that you can kind of derive so many very interesting fan theories from these things. And I think the lore that they're building behind Kier, behind the myth of Kier, the story of Kier, this larger than life Masonic figure that they're trying to kind of portray, they're creating a very rich and interesting history that we can't help but want to learn a little bit more about. So I love how there's so much going on Severance. You got this great storyline on the surface, but beneath the surface, you also have all these very interesting kind of sub storylines, these smaller storylines going on. And that's good writing to me. Like anytime I see a show that is capable of juggling multiple storylines at once and keeping a high quality throughout each one of them, that's a really good sign. Because I've seen a lot of other shows where one storyline is like really, really good, or two storylines will be really good, and the rest will be kind of like you want to fast forward through them almost. But I love what Severance is doing. Everything from their main story to some of these smaller storylines, they're all incredibly intriguing, and you just can't help but want to learn more about each one of these characters. And they've created such rich characters here that you can't help but admire and want to learn a little bit more about. And that's, of course, a testament to the writing, but definitely a testament to the acting as well. And we talked a little bit about this in our Saturday show, how much we were praising Gemma's performance in episode 7. I mean, how bad did she just kill it in this episode? Like, this was some phenomenal acting from her in terms of just, and somebody said it in the comment section, they said it super, and it was kind of super apt, and it was definitely how I felt towards the end of the episode. By the time you get to the end of the episode, it's almost hard to watch, seeing everything they put Gemma through. Like, you really feel bad for this woman by the time you get to the end of this episode, especially this shot right here. Just as right after she thinks she's going to escape, she finally is getting away from the clutches of Lumon, only to find out that she steps into this elevator and boom, she switches back to Miss Casey, the nice, kind, docile Miss Casey who wouldn't even know how to escape if she tried. And then you see her come back into this elevator. She goes back down, switches back over to Gemma, and she has just that realization that she's back here. She's right back where she started. And you think about the journey that she went on getting to here, everything that Lumon has put her through, everything that this creepy ass dentist has put her through, and his super unhealthy obsession with her. You couldn't help but just really feel for her in this scene where it was such a good acting performance, where it really came across like this poor woman, she's at the end of her rope. Like, I don't know how she's going to take more of this. How could anybody take more of this after everything she's been through? Absolutely phenomenal acting.
Amazing. Amazing. Everything about this past episode was just so great and so honest in the way that it was retelling the story of how it would be to have a relationship like Gemma has had with Mark, the struggles of their relationship, the miscarriage scene. I do recall the comment that you're talking about, and um, Jeremy Seves, he reads all of your comments, every single one of your comments, and if he likes it, he remembers it. That's the great thing about Jeremy. So anytime that you make a point, he remembers that. And yes, it was beautifully said, where it was like they couldn't take any more. It got to a point where it was like, this is too much. Please stop torturing this woman, right? And that is very much the sense that you get. It's so profound and so moving that the only thing that she says as she's backing away into the wall is Mark. She just keeps saying Mark, Mark. And it's so heartbreaking. This shot in itself, the one that you have on screen, is so beautiful because it really makes me recall one of my favorite lines from the show, where Mark says, "Every day felt like a year. You felt like you were choking on her ghost." And in this particular shot, I thought they seemed like ghosts to each other. They're both haunted by the ghost of what was. She keeps trying to get back to Mark, and Mark keeps like not being able to move on or to live his life because he's haunted by the ghost of Gemma. It's just so moving. The way that they symbolically filmed it was also so heartbreaking. So I couldn't agree more.
Totally agree. And this is why, again, Jessica Lee Guinea, who directed the episode, who is usually the Severance cinematographer. This was her very first time stepping into the director's chair, the first time she's ever directed an episode. And I never would have guessed that, and how well this episode was directed. And I think when you have a very good cinematographer, I feel like that job transitions well to the director's chair because you have such a good eye for film. You have such a good eye for camera angles and shots. What shots will work? What establishing shots won't work? Dutch angles, everything. Like cinematographers know filmmaking better than anybody. So I think her stepping into the director's chair, she really kind of showed just what she's capable of in this episode, and she's capable of a lot. Like, and to know later on that I found out that there is not a single bit of CGI in this episode anywhere. Every single shot we see was an actual practical shot that they did. There's even one shot, very super interesting transition shot, where we literally see them transition from one floor to the floor right below them. And they literally go right through the wires. Like you see, remember that shot where they literally go through the cable wires? To get that shot, they literally had to split cable wires and put a minuscule camera into a cable wire to get that shot. That was not CGI. That was actually a practical shot that took them so long to do. When I heard that, I was so stunned when I heard that. I was like, there's no possible way that was not CGI. There's no possible way. They might have cleaned it up a little bit in post-production maybe, but it's so interesting to see that there was no CGI in this episode anywhere, that every single shot was a real world shot. And yeah, no CGI is classy and hard to do nowadays. It really is, Quan, and especially nowadays where CGI has become so advanced and it's become almost a crutch in some filmmakers' repertoire, where they come up against a wall and they figure, okay, I can either kind of use my creativity to find a way to do this physically, or I can just rely on CGI. And I get it. Some people like to just rely on CGI. It's easier, even though it's expensive. But when I see directors or cinematographers or anyone going the extra mile like they did for this episode and making every shot physical, no CGI, even when they're literally splitting wires and putting miniature cameras inside of a wire to get that transition shot, that is incredibly impressive to me. And it shows that they not only have the creativity, but they're willing to go that extra mile to get the shot that they want. And they're not willing to just rely on CGI to finish and fix everything for them. And a lot of shows and movies do that. They'll have a kind of a shot in their mind, and then they'll get on set and they'll realize what they had on paper doesn't quite transition to the real world. It's very easy to write a scene down on paper, but then to actually bring that scene to life on an actual physical set is a little bit different sometimes. Not everything translates from paper to screen. And that's where usually you'll see directors and editors kind of and cinematographers lean a little bit heavier into the CGI to kind of fix what they couldn't do practically. But I love the use of practical shots here in this episode. This whole show has been very much a staple for practical shots and not relying on CGI, even the very beginning of the season. And I believe you and I watched the video where it's Ben Stiller and Adam Scott explaining the running scene at the beginning of season 2, where he's running like Tom Cruise all throughout the halls trying to find the wellness center. And they talk about all the specific technology and the specific kind of cameras that they had to use to get each and every one of those shots to make sure they were actual practical shots and no CGI. And they had this kind of swing arm technology that it's got like this 360-degree radius capability to it. And we see them utilize it a few times in that running scene where we see Mark kind of stop, spinning around, and as he's spinning counterclockwise, the camera is spinning clockwise in the opposite direction around him. And it just creates such an interesting, jarring effect to it. And to know that all of that is just completely practically shot and none of it was CGI, yeah, definitely classy, Quan. 100% agree with you. And again, hard to do nowadays because it is just so easy for people to just rely on CGI. It's a lot easier. But I appreciate filmmakers that go the extra mile for sure. For
Oh yeah,
sure.
classy, and like your chat is saying, beautiful. This episode 7, it wasn't just, if you are somebody who understands that, like Jeremy, then you look at all of that and appreciate it. If you're somebody who doesn't quite understand everything, but can appreciate the beauty and the depth of the episode, like me, it was beautiful. This entire episode I would recommend to anybody, even if they
Yeah.
didn't like the show, if they wanted to see something depicted in a beautiful manner. It was heartbreaking. However, there was so much
Yeah.
beauty in it. Like Starry in the chat was saying, the scene where they transition and you're looking at Gemma's eyes
Oh,
from being
yes.
full of hope to
Yeah.
hopeless, and you literally
Uh,
see the life literally leave her eyes
uh,
when she's going through this horrible miscarriage. It was so beautifully filmed. Um, just can't say enough great things about it, really. And even the outfit. When you look at the wardrobe, everybody was saying Gemma's outfit is like Star Trek, right?
yeah.
I confuse
Yeah.
Star Wars and Star Trek, and don't kill me, guys, okay? But I know they're totally different. I know they're totally different. Um, but the outfit, I really liked it because it gave you a sense of uneasiness. Like that was not
Yeah.
comfortable. Even though it
Yes.
might technically be comfortable, it was so tailored
Yeah.
that it gave you a
Constricting.
sense, yes, of just this medical, uncomfortable,
Yeah.
clinical outfit. It was the
Yeah.
perfect choice, really.
It was. It was almost. It's the perfect choice to kind of showcase that this is a medical prisoner in a sense. This isn't just a
Mhm.
medical patient in a gown in a onesie with the open back, and you see the crack of their butt every once in a while. Like this was a prisoner. This is literally a prisoner patient. And yeah, that suit did kind of give off a little bit more of that vibe. Like it was this kind of constricting kind of, it was a cell within a cell in a sense, with the suit itself.
Yes.
Yeah. And and that's why I liked how they had her in that suit every time it was Gemma Prime, the original real Gemma before they severed her into oblivion and created all these other
Mhm.
Gemmas. There's still that one original Gemma that was originally her, and that's the one in that gray suit. And I liked how every time she was in that personality, they always had her in that suit. So we, as the audience, always knew, okay, this is Prime Gemma. This is Gemma Prime, the original. And then we see her in all of these other costumes, all of these other period correct costumes, whether it's the 50s style
Mhm.
Christmas or the 80s style stewardess look. You could tell, okay, these are the other personas of Gemma. So not only was it an interesting wardrobe choice, but it was an interesting choice on the writings, on the writers to showcase to the audience that she's in a different personality every time she's in a different outfit. It just makes it easier to distinguish all the different personalities that they were playing with in one episode. But yeah, it's been so crazy to see what they've been doing with just the use of practical shots and no CGI. And as Quan Solar brings up, also she used film to for the retro scenes, and I love the retro scenes, and I even grabbed a little clip
Mhm.
of the retro scenes because they are so good looking, and this is the kind of cinematography that I can applaud, and you can tell that they really take their time on establishing these retro kind of shots. Remember how beautiful this looked. Great shots,
Yep.
just incredibly good filmmaking, incredibly good cinematography, and good editing as well. Like this is what time very well spent in the post production phase. Love the use of retro scenes. 100% agree, Quan. Love that indeed. Season
Beautiful.
two is wonderful, but it's so beautiful, isn't it? Like it really was so beautiful. And as I believe Starry was the one who brought it up, these shots in particular here, the shots of her kind of transitioning from just super happy, at the dinner.
Mm.
You know, this is the moment where Devin kind of looks over at her and finds out that she's pregnant. She goes to pour, Devin goes to pour her a glass of wine, and she kind of cups her, cups the top of her cup, indicating, oh, I can't drink right now. I'm with child. And Devin knew instantly. Like, they look right at each other, and she just knew. Girls know, they can sense that. And that was a dead giveaway with her kind of covering her glass. And it was just such a moment of joy. You go from the ultimate moment of joy, knowing that she has this new life inside of her, to this just beautiful transition to this horrible, dark moment that that life is extinguished. So it's almost like you see the birth of that child and the death of that child in one fell swoop, from one transition shot to the other. And it was super, super beautifully done, super dark, of course. I mean, it's super tragic what happened to her, but just in terms of the filmmaking aspect of it, this was one of the best transitions of the whole episode. Just seeing that life created to life snuffed out in the span of a second.
Wow. I love the way that you describe that. The life and death, right, of this so wanted child. And then the way that they film the miscarriage scene in itself. And we talked about this, but you really got the sense of what it was. So many times we are not privy to what a miscarriage is for the character. We just kind
What
of
it
get
really
a
looks
little
like.
bit of information.
Yeah.
But this time we got to see so much more of it, and so much of the pain psychologically that Gemma goes through in the moment, that you really did feel the death and the loss. It felt like a death because it
Yeah.
was for her, right? As it is for many. So
Yeah.
I really appreciated this episode. Super heartbreaking, yes, but deep and beautiful in a way that it was honest about real life things that a lot of people go through, right? They have
Mhm.
done an amazing job at capturing difficult emotions and situations in a respectful and almost beautiful way, because it
Mhm.
honors the sadness that people do go through, and honoring
Yeah.
that is always great, I think, when you see it in a show, because if you have been through it, right, it feels good to see it depicted in a way that you understand it. And your chat
Yeah.
has mentioned that a lot, right? We have a
Yeah.
lot of Sevis who mention one thing or the other being what their life is like, and they appreciate the show for that.
Mhm. Yeah, and that is good. It is good to see when you do see that, because they are diving into some pretty serious topics in season 2, and some pretty real world topics. Despair, as you said, Bill, Bill Chill, absolutely. Like, despair has been a huge part of this second season, where they are showing us the darker side of life. Some of the things that people do go through on a daily basis that are incredibly horrific and tragic, like a miscarriage. And yeah, they tend to portray these things in a very beautiful yet very respectful manner, where they're not looking for the shock value. And that's one thing that shows tend to kind of lean into. They can tend to fall into that trap where they want to predict, they want to kind of show a scene that is profound, that people can relate to, something dark, something tragic. But sometimes I feel like shows lean a little bit too much into trying to create that shock value reaction, as opposed to just creating that genuine reaction, that what this is really like. And yeah, you mentioned it perfectly with some of the miscarriage scenes we've seen in other films and movies, where you see the beginning of the miscarriage and then you see the aftermath. All you see is, whether it's the wife telling the husband later on, it's always a scene transition, a scene cut to it totally being over. You never actually see, not often anyway, see them actually going through all of it, going through the stages of realizing it's happening, processing that it's happening, going through that grief. And that's exactly what we saw Gemma do here. She sees it happen, she realizes it's happening, and they don't go away. They don't just cut away to another scene and
Hmm.
see the aftermath. We see her going through it in real time. And that's why I think it was a really good idea for them to have Mark come into the bathroom while this is happening, as opposed to
Hmm.
them doing a scene where she tells Mark the next day. I don't think it would have hit as well. I don't think it would have been as genuine. It just wouldn't have had that same kind of profound feelings. I think Mark walking into the bathroom when he did and actually seeing her go through this instead of just hearing what she went through is way different. And I think it's more realistic.
Yeah. Oh, couldn't agree more. Yes. Um, despair, Bill. Despair. If
Despair.
despair could be photographed, it is that. It is
Yeah.
that screenshot right there. If despair could be pictured. Yes, indeed.
Oof, man. Tough. I totally appreciate seeing Gemma's story because we only knew Miss Casey. It made us fall in love with her and her humanity. And that was one thing that was very interesting to see this episode. And I 100% agree with you as well. We've seen Miss Casey a handful of times. And, we got a sense of who she is. And you definitely already got a sense that you feel bad for her. And you know that she was Mark's wife at one point. We have all of these notions and all of this backstory in our heads of who she was when she was Gemma, but we never actually really knew. We never actually got to see Gemma apart from a few pictures. And that must have been a little interesting for her to step in from an acting standpoint, to go from playing this Miss Casey character throughout the entirety of season one, all the while knowing that this Gemma character exists, yet never having a chance to actually act in the skin of the Gemma character and kind of flesh that character out for herself. And I feel like, I don't know, I feel like she nailed it. She got right into the headspace of who Gemma was. She crafted a very, strong, interesting, funny, independent Gemma at the beginning when we first meet her. And we see her go on this journey, this very arduous journey that she goes through from start to finish, from meeting and falling in love with Mark, to them being a super happy couple, to getting pregnant, to the miscarriage. And then after the miscarriage happens, you start to see her and Mark's marriage start to become incredibly strained. They start to become more and more distant from each other. And that's why I thought you had the really good kind of metaphor, in terms of later on in the episode, we see Mark kind of putting together or taking apart the cradle, which is the perfect metaphor for their relationship. Their relationship is falling apart just like this baby cradle is falling apart. It was the perfect timing for that scene. And yeah, it gives you an extra appreciation for Gemma and Miss Casey as a character, but also for the actress as well, just portraying such an interesting character and not having a whole lot of time to do it. It's one thing when an actor has a lot of time to kind of get into the headspace of a role and start to think, who is this character? When I'm playing this character, when I'm wearing the skin of this character, who is she? What does she like? What does she not like? What are her kind of quirks? Little things that flesh out a character that make them human, as opposed to just playing a simple role that doesn't have much depth. Characters, most actors anyway, at least actors that are very dedicated, they want to get into the headspace of who a character is before they get into the skin of that character. They want to know who that character is upstairs. What are their motivations? What are their drives? What are their wants? What are their needs? And for her not having literally any time to play Gemma until this episode, for this being her first time portraying that Gemma character, I feel like she created a very, very beautiful storyline from start to finish of seeing Gemma go on this horrible journey, not just in the flashback from the miscarriage to the strained marriage, but then it gets even worse because then we see everything that she was put through at the hands of Lumon. And that's why I totally agree with the comment that I saw last week, that by the time you get to the end of the episode and you get to that elevator scene and you see her trying to escape only to get sent back, you feel so bad for her. Like, it's almost like you can't take any more seeing this poor woman go through this. Like, you really feel for her by the end of this episode. And it's a testament to the writing, yes, but it's an even bigger testament to the acting. I feel she carried this episode. Like, this episode was her episode, definitely.
For sure. And I completely agree. She really brought who Gemma was to life in a way where you completely feel so bad for her that you almost forget about Helly. You forget about Mark Inney, you completely forget about everybody else and just focus on what she has been going through while everything was happening upstairs. And then you always you always inspire me to think one step ahead because I usually don't. But you're always asking the question, what's going to happen next? How does this
Hmm.
end? Right.
Yeah.
And now that we have seen everything about Gemma, it brings us to the question of what is actually going to happen. Like, we have Helly, she's in love with Innie Mark. We have Outie
Yeah.
Mark, who's trying to get back to Gemma. We love Helly, but now
Yeah.
we feel so profoundly for Gemma.
Yeah.
There was a point in time where I just wanted Helly to be happy, but now that I have
Me too.
seen Gemma's backstory, I think I just want her to be happy above all else. She's been through so
Mhm.
much.
And it's one of those things where yes, it's like you have this idea of Gemma in your mind, and it's like yes, you want her to have a happy ending, but we have spent so much time with Mark and Helly, so you kind of almost wanted to root for Mark and Helly a little bit more, just because you know them better, you see them every episode, you see their unlikely love story and everything that they've been through, them kind of going through everything that happened on the Ortbo, to Mark kind of not handling it the best way the next episode, to him finally stepping up and telling her the truth and then making up, and the way Helly kind of gets her confidence and her strength back and wants to create her own memory with Mark, and she doesn't want Helena's in her head. It's like
Mhm.
they have such a good story already. So it was very
Yeah.
easy to want to root for any Mark and Helly, because you have to also ask the question, which one of these loves is not going to last, because there's no way they're both going to last. There's no way Audi
Mhm.
Mark and Gemma are going to go away happy, and Annie Mark and Helly are going to go away happy. There's no possible way all four of them can get what they want. It's just not
Yeah.
possible. One of these couples is not going to last. So you always wonder, okay, which one do I like better? Which one do I root for? And up until this episode, yeah, I do think I leaned a little bit more Annie Mark and Helly. But after seeing this and seeing everything that Gemma went through, and then finally fleshing out the Gemma character, to now we can actually put a, not just a face to the name. Like we hear Gemma, and all we used to think about is Mark's ex-wife, Mark's wife, and
Mhm.
we see the pictures of her. But now when we think of Gemma and Mark, we have actual reference. We have actual scenes to go back and see, so we can see for ourselves just how happy they were at the beginning. So now it's a little bit tougher to see
Yeah.
which one you root for. And I guess that's a question to ask the chat and you as well. What do you guys think? After watching this episode, now that we have at least gotten a chance to see Innie Mark and Helly together, and now we have seen Audi Mark and Gemma together, which couple do you guys favor? If you had to pick just one of these couples surviving and getting their love story in the end, which couple would you rather see make it? Audi Mark and Gemma, or Innie Mark and Helly? Do you have a preference now, PM, or one you would rather see
Oh,
win or last? I know it's a tough question.
wow. That is an excellent question. And I'm sure the oracles in the chat will let us know what the right answer is. Um,
Mhm.
I want to see kind of what they say, so I could just go with their answer. But I think Gemma. I think just Gemma. I mean, she has been through
Okay.
so much. I know every sort of suffering is suffering, correct. However, her suffering,
Mhm.
I can't help
Uh,
but feel that she has suffered the most. I
yeah.
can't help but feel that while they were macro data refining on a computer, she was being tortured every day.
Yeah. Uh,
So to me, it's like, no, it has to be Gemma. I'm so sorry, Helly. I just want Gemma to be happy. And Innie
I
Mark, I
do
feel
too.
bad for him too because
Yeah.
this is the thing. When it comes to Helly or Gemma, I like Gemma. Like I want her, I like Helly too, but Gemma has suffered so much. I want her to be happy. When it comes to
Yeah.
Innie Mark and Audi Mark, I want Innie Mark to be happy.
Yes. Yes. I'm the same way. I'm the exact same way. It's like when it comes to the marks, I like any mark a little bit better. I think any mark has this kind of endearing quality to him, this endearing innocence, this endearing kind of want and need to genuinely be a good person. Where we've seen at times, Audi Mark has exhibited signs of selfishness and maybe dealing with things in not the healthiest of ways, whether it's his drinking, whether it's him literally taking his wife's ashes and just shoving them in a dusty box and shoving them in the basement to forget about
Yeah.
them. He doesn't handle with his, he doesn't process his emotions in the healthiest way all the time. But I feel like any mark, even though he did have that one kind of slip up in that one episode where he was being a little mean to Helly, he wasn't really kind of processing everything too well, which could be understandable. He went through an ordeal as well. He was also violated and deceived. Luckily, he made up for it in the next episode where he did finally come clean to Helly, and we see them make up in this beautiful manner. So yes, I do kind of tend to agree with you. I feel like any Mark is my favorite of the two Marks, but yeah, after seeing everything Gemma went through, Gemma suffered way more than Helly. Even though Helly has suffered too, Gemma has suffered way more. Nobody on this show has suffered more than Gemma now that
Yeah.
we have actually seen her story. So you do kind of just want her to have that happy ending after everything she's been through. But yeah, it's tough. It's tough. Let's see what the chat is saying. What are you guys saying? Do you want to see any Mark and Helly end up making it, or do you guys want to see Outie Mark and Gemma end up making it? Starry says, I stopped rooting for Helly when we realized she's an Eagan. Mark's grieving is hard to see, and knowing his wife is alive made me root for his quote unquote dead wife. And that's a perfectly good reason. I mean, we do know that Helly is an Eagan at the end of the day, which could be a little bit of an asterisk next to her for sure. Absolutely. Quan says Gemma and Mark. Awesome. Megan says, I love Helly R, but I want to see Mark and Gemma back together. Awesome. Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Mark dealing with the Eagan family would be insane, in my opinion. I know.
Talk
Imagine
about
those,
crazy in-laws. Right.
imagine those Christmases and those Thanksgivings. Yeah, that'd be a
Jesus.
blast. Bill Chill says any Mark and Helly are okay. So we got to vote for any Mark and Helly. That's good too. That is good too. Unless reintegration helps Mark to accept sadness, he and Gemma won't be happy. He left Gemma isolated after the miscarriage because of his own pain. And again, and that's one thing about the Outie Mark that we tend to see. He doesn't always process emotions in the healthiest of ways, for sure. And that can lead to even more strain among the marriage between Gemma and Mark, which it ultimately did do. I mean, he wasn't there as much as he could have, to the point where the last time Gemma and Mark see each other, they're incredibly kind of distant, where Gemma says, I love you, Mark, and then she has to kind of come back into the room and say it again just so she can get a response out of him, which was then mirrored earlier in the episode with the creepy-ass dentist saying the same thing to Gemma, I love you, and she doesn't say it back, and he's like, I said I love you. It's like it's the exact mirror of that scene. So yeah, no, I can see where you're coming from, and you know, he wasn't there for as much as he could have been after the miscarriage, for sure. Would any Mark be happy with either any or Outie Helena / Helly? What's Helena's goal? I don't like her. Yeah, Helena's, you know, I do think she's devious. I do think she is, you know, very twisted for what she did, very selfish, manipulative. The way Dan Erickson, the creator of Severance, describes it, he was talking about what things can and cannot transcend the severance barrier, in terms of what are some feelings that your innie will have that your outie will feel too, and vice versa. And he did talk a little bit about the Helena situation, how Helly does have a genuine love for Mark. She does have a genuine deep connection for Mark. And he asked the audience how much of Helena's feelings for Mark are carried over from Helly. How much of these feelings, of these genuine feelings that Helena does have, because he did describe the feelings that Helena has for Mark as genuine. And this is coming directly from the creator of the show. He is telling us that Helena does actually have feelings for Mark. But what is it? Is it something that she developed on her own out of jealousy after seeing Mark and Helly so happy together on the surveillance, seeing that Helly and Mark have this kind of freedom that she doesn't have, even though they're only innies, and how much of it has just been carried over from the severance barrier? How much has transcended the severance barrier? These feelings, where do they come from? But yeah, what is Helena's goal ultimately? Because now we see her cozying up to Mark's outie. You know, obviously she burned her cover with the innie, so she clearly can't pursue anything with him. So now she's pursuing something with the outie. But I guess there's an underlying question as to, is Helena just trying to pursue Mark because she genuinely has feelings for him only? Or is there another agenda there? Is there some other kind of goal that Helena has? And yeah, you know, ultimately it's hard to trust her or like her after everything she's done. I don't have a whole lot of sympathy left for Helena after what she did. for sure.
No, and it reminds me of what her father says. Every time I see her do one of these horrible things, I think to myself, oh my God, Elena is acting like a fetid mop. She's like running around doing this horrible things that like nobody should do. No one should do the type of stuff that she does. And I think, yeah, that is a fetid moppet behavior, right?
A
Um,
little bit of Betty Boppet behavior, yeah, little bit,
and
just a
you
bit.
kind of mentioned this in your episode 8 preview video, the vitriol between Elena and Helly. I
Yeah,
mean, you have heard about love rivals, somebody having a rival to the person that they're in love with. But to have
yeah,
your love rival be yourself, I mean, that
yes,
is like taking this idea to another level. And indeed,
yeah,
they have such
yeah,
vitriol for each other, and they are both in love with the same person. At least Helly and Gemma, um, they're not the same person. But
yeah,
Helly also has Elena to contend with, and she
yeah,
is part of her psyche in a way, right? Part of that unsevered self. So
yeah.
it makes it even more layered and even more interesting because what can you do? I mean, Helly has attempted to hurt herself in order to hurt Elena, but there's no way to hurt your love rival unless you're willing to do that to yourself. So it makes it
Good
very
point.
complex.
Very good point. Very good point. It's like, yeah, you're going to have to willing to hurt yourself if you want to hurt this other person because they're a part of you. Essentially, they are you in a sense. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it seems like the chat is mostly going with Gemma after seeing this episode, but some are still going for Any Mark and the Innies. Any Mark and Any Helly because they are both so pure and stuck in hell together. They are both each other's real love, and they both trying so hard to do the right thing and help out Audie Mark. And that is another point as well. Um, you do bring up an interesting idea that yes, even though Any Mark and Any Helly are in love, they're both actively trying to help Audie Mark find his wife, even though there must be a part of them that knows deep down that if Audie Mark and his wife get together, it's going to mean the end of them. So yes, they're even knowing that it could be a self-sacrifice of a sense, Any Mark and Any Helly are still trying to help Audie Mark and help Gemma. So that's a good point. It is a selfless act for sure. Every one of us would act like innies if we didn't have to worry about bills and real life trauma. That is true too, Golden Child. That is true too. No care
Absolutely,
in the
golden
world.
child.
Yeah, who doesn't want to go through life and not have to worry about real life shit? I mean, that must be
But
a joy.
it fits what the doctor
Yeah,
or the creepy dentist was saying to Gemma. If we recall Golden Child, you absolutely have a point, and it brings us back to the episode and what could happen next. The creepy dentist says to Gemma, Kier is going to take Mark's pain away, just like we have taken all of your pain away. And so it gives us this idea of living in the real world is painful, it's
yeah,
traumatic, and sometimes you go through things that shape you in not the most positive way. Being
yeah,
severed or being an innie puts you in a state where you don't have to deal with that. You don't have to deal with the grief or the pain or the trauma, whether it's physical or emotional pain. So you're absolutely right. As innies, you don't necessarily have to deal with real life. But is that better? Does that mean that it's genuine? Right? It brings up all sorts of questions because, according
yeah.
to the creepy dentist, severance just takes away all of your pain and you get to live in this isolated, innocent sort of bliss, at least in one of your severed lives.
Exactly. Yeah. No, exactly. That's a perfect point. That is a perfect point. Yeah, I mean, this creepy dentist, this dude gives me nightmares. I don't. They cast the perfect actor to play this creepy dentist. I swear, he just looks evil, doesn't he? Doesn't he just look evil?
Yeah.
Yeah, fucking
Yeah.
dude. I don't like
I
this
knew he
dude.
was obsessed with her. And I think
Yeah,
I saw a lot of your Sevi saying immediately when they saw him, they knew that what he was doing was not procedure.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's before we even knew what he was
yeah.
up to. We just kind
Hmm.
of, he's such an amazing actor that you see the way that he looks at Gemma and you know this is not procedure. Like you are
Yeah.
going the extra mile because you're obsessed
Oh,
with her.
you could just tell, right? You're 100% right. And I think, a lot of us knew, like you said, the chat just knew right away that as soon as you see this guy, you know that this is unhealthy. I mean, this is creepy. This is going a little bit too far. He's going above and beyond what Lumen wants him to do. He's made this personal with him. To the point where even Drummond himself has to kind of, tell him at one point, like, hey, you're going to have to give her up at one point. Um, and yeah, he's just very good acting, very good acting. Anytime an actor can elicit this kind of, visceral response out of me when I watch his character, that tells me that the actor's doing a very good job in playing their antagonistic role, which of course he was very much an antagonistic role for this creepy dentist doctor dude. Well, we got some more for Gemma and Mark. Okay, we got another Gemma, another one for Gemma and Mark. Helly is Helena. Okay, yeah, and some people, knowing that Helly is an Eagan now, that has kind of tainted some of Helly's image for some fans. That is something I have seen a lot of fans mention. Now that they know that she is technically an Eagan, they see Helly a little bit differently, and I can understand that. I can understand that to a certain extent. Knowing Severance, we ain't getting none. And honestly, Intolerable, I think you're right. I think you're 100% right. I think that's the perfect answer right there, my friend. Knowing Severance, we're probably not going to get either one of these couples getting a happy ending. I think that's probably the most likely outcome. I mean, right? I mean, neither of them are going to get the happy ending, right? I think Miss Cobel's right. Ma,
They told us.
there will be no honeymoon ending for you.
I love your cowbell. I love your impression of cowbell. You do it so well.
Oh, she's so great. I can't wait to see her return. I really can't. Mark, there will be no honeymoon ending for you. She's super creepy. And again, Patricia Arquette is a great actress too. So she's really kind of diving into this villainous role of this Miss Cobel character. But no, I do think you're 100% spot on, Intolerant. I think knowing Severance, we're not going to get either one of these happy endings for sure. We've got more Mark and Gemma. Hate to say that, but most couples in real life don't survive that sort of thing happening. And no, that is true. And there's tons of case studies that will show that will actually back that up, that certain things like having a miscarriage or just losing a child in general, that kind of thing can really kill a relationship. And it has so many times, where sometimes it's just something couples can't get over sometimes, which I would never want to even imagine that. But yeah, that is a real thing, where sometimes that can be the end of a relationship, where it's just too tragic to go on sometimes, which is horrible. You hate to see something even more horrible come out of a tragedy like that. But that is the case in real life. That does tend to happen. And I think we see that showcased here on the show. If Gemma didn't get into her accident, this quote unquote accident, if she didn't get grabbed up by Lumen, if Mark and Gemma would have just been left alone to their devices, I do have a feeling that's probably where they were heading. It did seem like they were becoming more and more strained in the relationship, more and more distant from each other. And yeah, that was ultimately the catalyst of it, the loss of the child. It can totally tear apart a couple.
Yeah.
Man.
I mean, it all goes back to the crib. Like, and the Sevis were having a conversation about this in your video. In the comment section, we were going back and forth and talking about the crib, right? The symbolism of Mark trying and struggling so hard to build this crib, because as Gemma is attempting to conceive a child, all he can do really is build this crib, but we know that he's not good at building because Gemma told us. So in a way, both of them are attempting to do something that they, for whatever reason, can't accomplish. And you see the suffering, the pain. She told us specifically, right? I always go back to what you have told us. Everything is put in the episode for a reason, every line, every sentence. So Gemma telling us when he buys the crib, like, who's gonna build it? You are not handy. And then him struggling in this manner, just the symbolism of struggling to build his family, struggling to have this child, to keep everything together as it's all falling apart, slipping through his fingers. Nothing is coming together. I mean, it's just so sad.
It is. It is sad, and it was the perfect timing for that scene, the perfect metaphor, seeing this crib, fall apart, seeing this crib come apart just as their marriage is literally coming apart. It's sad. It's the perfect kind of symbol of their relationship, and that's one thing that Severance does very well sometimes, whether it's through a metaphor, through symbolism. They tend to have these really good parallels where you'll see one thing just completely reflecting a whole theme of things that you see in an episode at a time. And this episode was definitely no exception. It was right along those lines as well. And this is something interesting. I did not know this. Fun fact: the creepy dentist was the voice of Beauty and the Beast in Disney's Beauty and the Beast. I imagine you're referring to the original animated Beauty and the Beast. I imagine. I had no idea that creepy dentist was the Beast in Beauty of the Beast. I didn't know he played the voice. It's interesting. Did not know that. Still learn something every day
Arguably,
from this stuff.
yeah, you guys are so full of knowledge. I love it. But arguably, Beauty and the Beast, another person holding captive someone that didn't want to be there
Yes.
necessarily and hoping that they would fall in love. So could
Ah,
they have seen that potentially and said, "You fit the bill, you fit the
oh my
part"?
God, yes. Oh my God, yes. Now that you mention it, and even to take it even one step further, it even kind of follows. I know I'm super obsessed with the whole Frankenstein Severance connection because it's so deep and it
Me
runs so
too.
deep, so far. But yes, it also parallels a little bit of Frankenstein and Frankenstein's bride and him wanting to have this need for a connection, wanting to have this need to have his own bride. So he, of course, inflicts or allows the same suffering that was inflicted onto him to be inflicted onto someone else just so he's not alone. So you do see these themes kind of tend to parallel each other every once in a while, and history does repeat a little bit.
Mm.
Yeah, great stuff, guys. Great stuff. I think we're going to get Mark and Helly integrated, and Gemma after Cold Harbor will only be Miss Casey, and that's my big worry
Mm.
as well. That's always been my biggest concern, that they're going to go through this crazy journey to eventually rescue Miss Casey. They'll get her out of Lumen, only to realize that Gemma is gone at that point. By the time they reach 100% of Cold Harbor, what if that completely erases Gemma and all that's left is Miss Casey? I always thought that would be a very kind of bittersweet ending, and I always kind of envisioned it happening a little bit like that, where yes, they do rescue her, but they don't get that happy ending they want because they realize Gemma is gone. There's no bringing Gemma back. All that is left is Miss Casey. I could totally see that being the case. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that Cobel is going to help Mark. This was my prediction a few episodes ago, and now I think it's a definite. They had to get rid of Ragabi for Cobel to enter Mark's arc, and that was another interesting thing. We see Devin in this episode. She very kind of a little bit uncharacteristically for her. Devin's usually the smart one, usually one that's always kind of grounded. And considering she knows who and what Cobel is, I was a little surprised to see her even mentioning or bringing up the idea of bringing Cobel to help Mark. But then again, Mark is her brother, and people will do anything for family. And if there is ever something that's going to cloud your judgment or make you maybe make a decision that you wouldn't make if you were of sound body and mind, it is something like that. Grief, desperation, it can lead to people making foolish decisions or decisions that they don't fully, think through because they're just trying to get a desperate fix to the problem. And part of me always wondered, it would be pretty interesting if Devin did actually make that call. If right before Mark's up, if it was maybe a scene that we didn't see as the audience, a scene that happened in transition in between scenes, that maybe Devin did really call Cobel. And maybe we do see Cobel show up in episode 8 after Mark is already woken up. And if that is the case, what's their reunion going to look like? Is it going to be a kind of a vitriolic reunion, as it were, with the Sweet Vitriol title, another kind of tie-in? Or, as you mentioned, could we potentially see a possibility where Cobel offers to help Mark? I don't know. I suppose anything could be possible. Cobel scares me. I know everyone is
Mhm.
predicting her redemption, but how do you know? How do you resist your training? And that's the thing. I've always really hoped that it would be Milkshake that had the redemption arc. I just felt like he was a little bit more suited to a redemption arc, at least where he was. I know it's going to be a while, and he. I mean, knowing that he knew everything that Gemma was being put through this whole time, and he's kind of okay with it, it does make Milchick's redemption a little bit tougher. Like he's got a lot of a longer road to get that redemption now after this, especially after this last episode when she gets so close to escaping, and it's Milchick of all people who sends her back to the testing room floor. After, at the beginning of season 2, we hear Milchick say to Mark and the rest of MDR that I don't want to be your jailers. I don't want to keep you prisoner here. I locked you in a room like an animal, he says to Mark at the beginning of the season.
Mm.
And here he is being just completely okay with Lumen doing way worse than that to Gemma, on top of keeping her locked in a room and testing her like an animal. So that was one thing that kind of disappointed me a little bit about Milchick when I saw that scene, because we see Milchick at the beginning of season 2, and he did almost seem like he was a little bit different. Like he maybe did feel a little bit bad for some of the things he did in season 1 under Cobel's reign. And it seems like he wanted to kind of differentiate his leadership with Cobel's. He didn't want to be another Miss Cobel. In terms of him instituting kindness reforms and stuff like this, stuff that Cobel would never do, trying to make the innies' lives a little bit more hospitable, offering family visitations to Dylan, stuff that Miss Cobel would never in a million years even think of. So when I did see Milchick specifically telling to Mark that, I locked you in a room like an animal and I don't want to be your jailer. From that to seeing this, to see him literally being Gemma's jailer and literally seeing her locked in a room and worse, and being experimented on and tortured day in and day out for years at a time, it paints Milchick's redemption arc a little bit tougher now. Like I think he's got a lot more that he's going to have to make up for if he's going to ever get true redemption. Like he has to rescue Gemma. If Milchick ever wants real redemption, it needs to start with him rescuing Gemma. He's the one that didn't let her escape. He's the one that's been keeping her here for all these years. If he ever wants to get a true redemption arc, he's got to help her out. And that's got to be the first of many things that I think he's going to have to do. But what about Cobel? Do you ever see Cobel having a redemption arc? And let me know what you guys think in the chat as well, because I thought that was an interesting comment that Joel brought up, that Cobel could potentially show up and maybe help Mark. Do you think that's a possibility, PM? And in the chat, what do you guys think? Do you think there's a possibility of a Cobel redemption arc?
Well, after watching your preview video for episode 8, I think yes. I think yes, because
Okay.
she has been let down by the company.
Mhm.
So the corporation itself maybe is not following what Kier would have wanted. She already has this obsession with Mark, the candle incident, plus her actually having a conversation with Mark at this point, because we see her talking to him. This is when she delivers that iconic, like, Mark, there's gonna be no honeymoon ending for you. So they're
Yeah.
talking. They
Yeah.
are having this, like you called it, the bitter mother of all reunions. And indeed, I feel like that is exactly what it's gonna be. Um,
Yeah.
but why have a conversation unless you're willing to give him information and to help him? If you don't want to help
Mhm.
him, there's no need for a conversation. So
Yeah.
I tend to lean towards yes. I think that in a way, even reluctantly, she's going to end up
Mhm.
helping.
Okay. Interesting. And I could see it. Yeah, I could potentially see Cobel maybe helping it, maybe helping Mark. Maybe Cobel has finally gotten to the point where she has, maybe loosened a little bit of her grip on just being so obsessed with getting this job back at Lumen. Maybe she will finally realize that, wait a minute, this company threw me out like a piece of trash. Why am I continuing to stay loyal to this company now? Why not help bring them down in a sense of revenge? enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing, where she does team up with
Mhm.
Mark. I could potentially see that, maybe. Yeah, for sure. Maybe Milkshake doesn't know what's going on down there. There is a mysterious and important. I thought that was a possibility as well, but I'm pretty sure Milkshake knows exactly what's going on down there because we kind of hear him say it in season one. In season one, there's a scene between Milkshake and Cobel. When Cobel is bringing Miss Casey up onto the severed floor, and Milkshake specifically says to Cobel, it's a good thing that they don't remember each other. That means the technology is working, which is word
Mhm.
for word the same thing that Drummond and the Doctor say to each other in this episode. It means the technology is working. The technology, in terms of them testing the severance barrier to see what is remembered from personality to personality. So Milkshake, I promise you, it seems like Milkshake knows exactly what is going on down there, and he's okay with it, unfortunately. And that sucks to see because I did have hope for him. I still do have hope for him, but I don't think there's any possibility that he doesn't know what's going on.
No, no possibility. And also, we have to remember that he has seen Miss Casey
Yeah.
affected. He saw her cry when he sent her down, um, and they told her that she would be doing no more wellness sessions. She
Oh
referred
yeah,
to
that's
it
right.
as the good old days. So she knew that that part of the process was over. And to her, because it's just Miss Casey, it's essentially death. She
Yeah,
then is crying and kind of wanting to talk to him. And he says,
yeah,
I'm really busy today. I have a lot of things to do. So he has been super cold. Not only that, but Jeremy, when you mentioned the line that he delivers of, I don't want to be your jailer, I had to
yeah,
lock you in a room like an animal. He then
yeah.
says, and that is something I will have to live with.
Yes,
So if
exactly.
locking someone in a room is so bad and you are genuine about that, how do you live with what you're doing to Miss Casey?
Ugh,
How do you live
yeah,
with getting there right on time? He was running. We see him opening the door, and you could see that he was
yeah,
sprinting to get there. This
yeah.
is one of those situations where you pretend to do your job, but you just don't do it quite right and let somebody
Right.
slip through the cracks, you know? Like you pretend that you just couldn't be fast enough. I
Exactly, and
mean,
that's you brought that up to me, and I thought that was that I would have loved to see something like that. Like, oh crap, I just happened to not get there in time. Whoops, she escaped. But no, he got right there in time and made sure she got sent right back down to that testing room floor. So I mean, just me personally, I don't think there's a chance that Milkshake doesn't know what's going on down there, especially if he's saying specifically, it's good that her and Mark don't remember each other. That means the technology is working. So he clearly knows Mark and Gemma were married. He knows that Lumen is experimenting on her and doing all this crazy stuff. He knows. And I think for me, it does paint his redemption as a little bit more unlikely. Or at the very least, it's going to be a lot longer road to get to that redemption, I guess. But I think it's still possible, even for Bilchik. But the Cobel redemption arc, that was something I never really thought of, and I was glad that that you brought that up in the chat, Joel, because I've kind of been so kind of focused on wondering whether or not if Milchik's redemption was possible that I never really kind of stopped to think, is Cobel's redemption possible? And that's a very interesting question. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I honestly don't know if Cobel will get a redemption arc, if she will just continue to be loyal to Kier and be this Kier absolutist, or if she will eventually kind of come around and start to help Mark or help the Innies. So no, that's an interesting one. I've thought about Milkshake so much that I never really took the time to think about Cobel's redemption and if that's possible even. So good point, very good point at least to bring up. Man, good stuff.
yeah, and in a way, when you think about that, when you say something like, I never stopped to think about Cobel, depending on what we see in the next episode, we might see some flashbacks to Kier's actual life, but also I'm thinking to Cobel herself as she's telling the story.
Yeah,
Depending on what we see, if she indeed was in an orphanage, then who thinks about her? We know everything that she has done and the horrible atrocities that she is culpable of. However, depending on what we see, she might potentially be a victim herself, a child brought into this corporate cult, brainwashed. We see her, she's much older now, and her entire life having been spent in this corporate cult. So we might walk away. Severance is just amazing. We might walk away from this episode feeling sorry for her, being on her side or part of her team. I wouldn't be surprised.
I think you're right. I mean, you guys have definitely made me think about it at the very least, and that was something that I hadn't thought of a whole lot of up until this point. Again, I've been so kind of focused on Milchick and his redemption arc, and if it's even possible for him, because I do really like the character of Milchick, and I think it's because I'm just such a huge fan of the actor, Avery Tillman in the role. Like, he's one of the best actors on this show. He has such a good screen presence, that I always, it's like I want to root for Milkshake, but I can't root for Milkshake because of everything that he's done. It's like I want to root for this guy, but I can't quite yet. So I do always hope that he would have a redemption arc, but no. I mean, Cobel having a redemption is a very interesting question as well. And I do tend to agree with you, Joel. I do think Milchick's redemption is definitely still possible, but it's definitely not going to be something that happens until the very end. That's kind of how I see it as well. Milchick will probably, hopefully, redeem himself at some point, but I definitely see that being a season 3 or maybe even a season 4 storyline. That's not going to happen. It's definitely not happening this season, that's for sure. It's not going to happen until the end. So if it is possible for Milkshake, it'll be a while. Yeah, it'll be a while. He's got a long road before he gets there. Milchick is the only one with the credentials to successfully help Gemma escape keycards, DNA sample, and biometrics. That's a very good point as well, Xavier. I mean, we've seen the security that Lumen has, very specific keycards, and down on the testing room floor, we specifically saw that you need a blood sample, like a straight up blood sample to get into some of these rooms. We see the nurse put her hand on the scanner and we see her, she gets pricked in her finger and takes a little bit of blood. Like, you need a specific blood sample to even get down there or to even get into some of those rooms once you're down there. So yeah, to break Gemma out, you're going to need to be somebody that has a pretty high security clearance. And yeah, Milkshake does fit that bill. He would be one of the only ones that is technically able to logistically actually help her. Mark, the innies, what are they going to do? I mean, even if they do find this elevator, even if they do access the testing room floor, how are they going to get back up it without getting swapped back to their innie or to their Audi? We know what happens when they step into these elevators. I don't know if the innies can rescue Gemma on their own. I think it's going to be one of those things where they're going to need some outside help. I don't know if they're capable. I don't know if they have the capability of doing it themselves.
Yeah.
Sure.
But you know what, Xavier? Now that you mentioned DNA sample, because they did make a point to show us that you, in fact, do need more than just a fingerprint. You need DNA. Helly
Yeah.
has Elena's DNA.
Ooh, good point. I didn't even think of that, PM. Yes. Yes. Helly has Helena's DNA. I wonder, though, if that's something that Lumen has put safeguards up against, where they removed Helena's DNA from the system because they know Helly is so temperamental and so erratic. Or maybe that's something they didn't think about. Maybe that's something they can exploit. I like that idea. I didn't even think of that. Fuck. That's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah, maybe Helly's the answer. Maybe Helly, and that's the thing. If Helly pretends to be Helena, that could be the key. That could be the
Hmm.
true key to really getting down onto that severed floor and actually really helping if Helly pretends to be Helena. We already know Helena went undercover as Helly once before. Milchick knew that that was Helena the whole time. Maybe other people on the severed floor or working at Lumen also knew that this was Helena the whole time. So yeah, is there a potential way that Helly could pretend to be Helena and gain that access? That's a very good idea. I didn't think of that. Very good
Yeah,
stuff.
and the Audi mark, right? He now has some information because of the Chinese restaurant encounter. Elena was flirting
Yeah.
with him, but she
Yeah.
makes sure to tell him, like, I'm a big deal. Like, I'm actually like,
I'm like
I'm
in
a
charge
big
of the
part of
company.
yes, exactly. So if he's reintegrated, then the INI would also have that information and say, hey, Elena is a super huge deal. maybe we could use this information to try to get to Gemma. Elena is like in charge of the company, right? That's the
Yeah.
memory that he would have from the Chinese restaurant. So potentially,
It's I love it. I'm super. I can't believe I didn't think of that. Like it's yeah. It could potentially be the answer that they need. It really could. Yeah, no, I like that. That's a good one. Maybe the dentist will set her free. He doesn't have to lose her. Ooh, interesting, Pam Jam. Interesting. I don't know. I feel like the dentist is so twisted and so maniacal and so narcissistic that I feel like he doesn't want Gemma free. He just wants to own Gemma exactly as she is on these floors, going from room to room, having all these experiences with her. It seems like that's what he's addicted to. That's what he's obsessed with. I don't know if he would even want Gemma on the outside. Well, I'm sure he would, but it seems like his fixation is in this day-to-day routine of putting her into all these different outfits and having go through all these
ugh.
different scenarios, even to the point where he was literally the flight stewardess on the airplane freaking simulation that she was in, and he's like, oh, don't worry, miss, everything's fine, here's your food. It's like, this dude's fucking crazy.
That was
Yeah,
my
I don't
favorite
know.
one because he gets hurt. That was my
Yeah,
favorite one.
that's
I
a
was
good
like,
one.
yes, I want to do that room again because he actually gets hurt.
Yeah, he smacks the freaking roof of that plane so hard. Love it, love it. Between that and when Gemma finally makes the escape attempt and she just cracks the chair over his freaking head, I'm like, yes. Oh, next time, stab him with it. Take him out. Don't just knock him out. Take him out completely. Yeah, no, it's a good stuff, guys. Good, very good stuff. And yeah, good one about Helly having Helena's DNA. Yeah, that's a really great one. I didn't think of that. So that is a really good idea, PM. That yeah, Helly has Helena's DNA. So maybe she could be the perfect key if she can convince them that she is Helena and pretend to be this Helena persona. That could get them into some classified areas that the innies themselves don't have access to. So that's actually a really good idea. I love that. I think I think Cobel could totally have a redemption arc, and I think it's possible too. I definitely think it's possible. I think it's possible for any character to have a redemption arc. I mean, there's a reason why a redemption arc is redeeming. It's because this person was once a bad guy. So there's not a whole lot of characters that I see in shows that are just outright completely irredeemable. Apart from like Joffrey and Ramsay Bolton and some of those characters who are just like completely irredeemable, most characters at least have a little bit of room for a redemption arc. I mean, look what happened with Jaime Lannister, for example, at least until the last season, and they just threw the writing out the window. But we don't need to go down that rabbit hole. But yeah, no, I agree. I could definitely see Cobel having a redemption arc. I do feel like yes, she's done some pretty heinous stuff, from some pretty heinous things, some pretty dark things, some pretty selfish things. But I do think she could have a redemption arc. But yeah, I don't want the creepy dentist to have a redemption arc. He's nasty. I'm with you there, Starry. I mean, if there's one character on the show that I don't want to see have a redemption arc, it's the creepy dentist. Definitely. He's too creepy. He doesn't deserve it. Way too creepy.
The way that you
Way
describe
too
it,
creepy.
Jeremy, I love the way that you describe things because it's so vivid, and most of the time it's a positive thing. But you did it once again, describing the creepy dentist, and this time I don't like it because it's so accurate. The loving the experiences that he has with Gemma by having all of these different experiences with the same person that he is obsessed with and putting
Yeah.
her in different outfits. The way that you
Mhm.
describe that makes it even darker because
It
that is
does.
in fact what he's doing. He
Yeah.
is basically, he has her like a doll where he can
Yeah.
make her believe whatever he wants. And
Yeah.
let's not forget, guys, chat, let's not forget that he told Gemma, maybe you have felt something in one of these rooms that you never felt for Mark. He then
Ugh.
goes a step further and says, maybe I've seen it. Like, what do you mean? Felt what?
Yeah.
What is he doing? I'm worried.
My God. Yeah, he's beyond creepy, isn't he? Like, oh my God, he's beyond creepy. And Yeah, it's like, what are you talking about? What are you trying to fill her head with now? What are you trying to convince her of now? That in some small way she's happier with you than she ever was with Mark? That's what he's trying to, I feel, ultimately
Hmm.
impart onto her. That maybe you felt something in one of these rooms that you never even felt with Mark, a kind of happiness that he never could have given you. It's like, what
Hmm.
kind of twisted fantasy world are you living in, bro? Look at what you're putting her through. You're torturing this poor woman. Think she's gonna love you after this? Get out of here. Get out of here. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. I think the nurse will break her out. That's an interesting one. Because one thing I did kind of notice at the very end of the episode, when we do see her make the escape attempt, and then we see her kind of realizing that she's back in the elevator, we do see the look on the nurse's face. And I don't know if it was just coincidence, but it did almost look like the nurse had that kind of the kind of face on her where she did slightly feel a little bad for her. You see her kind of picking her up off the floor, being a little bit gentle than a little more gently than she normally is, saying, "Come on, Gemma." I did just for a split second, I did kind of almost get the feeling that maybe the nurse could be an ally at some point. Because if anyone's seen all of the dark shit that this doctor has put Gemma through, it's this nurse. She's been right there every step of the way. I would imagine she's seen all of it. And if this nurse still does have a shred of humanity, a shred of decency left inside of her, then that is something that is going to ultimately wear on a person for a while. A moral person, a good person, can't watch this happen to another human being day in and day out and have it not affect them to the point where they want to act and help this person. So yeah, I think that's actually an interesting idea that maybe even the nurse could potentially help Gemma at some point because she did almost seem like she felt a little bad for her. Think that's a possibility? Think we
Hmm.
might see the nurse play a bigger role at some point?
I mean, she's a great actress and she's a major
Yeah,
actress. So for her
yeah,
to
very
just be a
intelligent.
nurse who does nothing and has like a tiny little small part,
Yeah,
maybe that's why they picked her because she will have a more significant part to play. So I could definitely see it. When I saw the actress
yeah,
in that role, I was like, okay, this is important.
yeah.
This role, this nurse is going to be important. So yeah, I
That's a
could see
very
it.
good point. That's actually a very good point, and I 100% agree with you. And I think that's why they even went so far as to recast Fields as John Noble this season, a
Mhm.
much, much more prominent actor that played Fields in season one. Because if we see the quick little glimpse of Fields and Burt through the window at the end of season one, it's a completely different kind of unknown, no name actor that's playing Fields in season one. And then they completely recast the role of Fields in season two with this just hugely recognizable, prominent actor in John Noble, who has so much credentials. I'm sure most people, when they see John Noble, they instantly recognize him, just like I'm sure a lot of people recognize her. So yeah, I think that's a possibility. Maybe they are specifically recast. They're casting these roles with a little bit more of a prominent actor and actress behind them because they're at least planning on these roles being slightly reoccurring at some point, where maybe we will see them again. And if the testing room floor is going to be such a huge part of the show, which it is already, and now that we have seen the testing room floor, it doesn't have to be cloaked in mystery. Once you reveal something, then the show can start returning to that thing a little bit more frequently because it's not some big reveal that they have to hide. So now that we have seen the testing room floor, now that we've spent a lot of time down there, we could totally potentially see more scenes in the testing room floor and seeing more scenes with this actress. So no, that's a very good point. Maybe she will play a bigger part down the road, and maybe that's why they did cast a more veteran actress, a more experienced actress to play this nurse because they did have other plans for her. That's a very good point, guys. Very good point indeed. Um, yeah. Ah, man, such a good show. Such a good show. I love where
Mhm.
Severance is heading. I love everything that it has done up until this point. This show, it never kind of ceases to amaze me in terms of everything that they managed to put together in a single episode. I hear a lot of people talking about how, sometimes it doesn't feel like an episode. It feels more like a cinematic experience. And I've said the same
Yes.
thing myself in the past. Sometimes it does kind of feel like you're watching a mini feature film, like you're watching a mini movie every week as opposed to just an episode of television. And that is a testament to not only how much television has improved over the years, the quality of it, the scale of it, the production of it, but you also have to have the skill there as well. And you also have to have the good story, the good writers, the good directors, the good cinematographers. And Severance has all of it. They have everything they possibly need. It's like the perfect mixture that kind of came together to create this really fascinating story that also looks very pleasing. It's very sleek and sexy. It just has that feature film look to it. Yeah, you do sometimes feel like you're watching again, a mini movie every week and not just a TV show. And I love that about Severance. Absolutely love that. We haven't seen the board, right? I'm convinced it's an AI. Now, that's another interesting thing. We've heard a lot of interesting theories surrounding the board and who or what the board really is. Now, I had a little bit of a tinfoil theory on who the board might potentially be. It's a little bit more tinfoily, yes, but in my Kier Frankenstein video that I did a few weeks back, where I dive into a little bit of the similarities between Kier and Frankenstein. No, it wasn't that episode. It was actually the episode 4, my episode 4 breakdown, when Irving tames his own temper of woe. And the famous episode 4, the episode that gave us all of this beautiful dialogue to remember.
Marshmallows are for team players, Dylan. They don't just hand them out.
A mini milkshake. That's so cute.
Love it. But yes, the board is another one of those things that has remained incredibly mysterious. They've maintained that illusion, that kind of Wizard of Oz feeling, like what is behind the curtain kind of deal? Who is the board really? And seeing as the number 4 is very prevalent on the show of Severance, we see the number 4 repeated over and over and over again, whether it's 4 MDR workers, 4 shadow twins, 4 tempers, you got to tame each temper. We see this 4 kind of repeated over and over again. And now that we know that there might be a actual physical manifestation of each temper, we have already met the human version of Frolic, which is Mr. Drummond. He has the tattoo on his arm that reads Frolic. So if there is a human version of Frolic, then that means there's probably a human version of the other 3 tempers, Dread, Malice, and oh my God, I cannot believe I'm blanking on the 4th one. Dread, Malice, Frolic.
Why can I remember either?
Why can I not remember it right now? Chat, help us out. Help us out, chat. We're having a brain fart. Whoa, there it is. Whoa, I just said it too. Whoa, thank you so much, my friend. Thank you, my friend. Yes, we see this 4 repeated over and over and over again. And yeah, I mean, when I first saw Drummond with the Frolic on his Frolic tattoo on his hand, I thought, could there be a potential possibility where there are only 4 board members, where each board member is a human representation of one of the 4 tempers, Frolic being one of them, Drummond being one of them, because we know Drummond is super high up on Lumen. He's not just your average employee. He's very, very high up there. It seems like he's so high up to the point where he's making decisions for even Helena. So Drummond is very high up. I don't think he's a normal kind of employee. Seems like he's a little bit more than that. So part of me wouldn't be surprised if there were 4 different board members. Each one of them were a representation of one of the tempers. We have Frolic and the other 3. There are a lot of people who think that the board is simply just Jame, that only Jame Eagan is the board, one person making all of the decisions, just him. And I could definitely potentially see that as well. That could definitely be possible, where it's only Jame, maybe only the CEO is the board. And every time a new CEO becomes the new CEO, we have what's referred to as the revolving, as Jame refers to it at the end of season 1. You will be there for my revolving, as he states to Helena, which is most likely his revolving into her becoming the next CEO. Almost like it's a sort of ritual that Lumen goes through when they go from one CEO to the other. So I could totally potentially see that as well, where maybe Jame Eagan just himself is the board. But then again, there's also a lot of theories out there that some people think that the board is AI, that it is an artificial intelligence kind of board, where the board is just one giant AI computer that makes all of the decisions for Lumen. And while I like that theory, I don't know if Lumen is the kind of company that would trust the final decision and the final word to something like a computer, like an AI. I feel like James Eagan and most of the Eagans that have come before him, I don't know, I feel like they're too maniacal, too kind of power hungry to ever have the final say in anybody else's hand other than them. So I do kind of like the idea of James Eagan himself being the board, although I do kind of like the four-person board idea as well, with Frolic, Dread, Woe, and Malice each being a board member and each having a human representation like we've met Frolic already. But yeah, I could totally see it being just James by himself as well. But what about you, PM, and what about you guys in the chat? Do you think the board is made up of actual people, or do you think the AI board theory is possible?
Well, I have first a question, clarification. Hasn't Drummond been identified or labeled to be part of the board, to be a board member?
Not officially. Not officially. I tried to find anything that was like officially him being
Official.
called a board member, and I couldn't find it myself. I mean, the only thing that we can guarantee is that he is super, super high up on Lumen. I thought he was a board member at first. Like when we first see him in the trailers for season 2, they definitely kind of portray him like he is a board member. He's always in the boardroom. He's always making decisions. So I always thought that maybe he would be a board member, but as far as I can tell, there's no direct confirmation stating that Drummond is a board member, just that he's super high up at Lumen.
Okay. Well, with that clarification in mind, I go back to your video on the prediction for episode 8 and Miss Cobel going underground and saying
Ooh.
it's alive or he's alive. It's the board.
Ah.
Whoever is the board, whoever that voice is that can't quite speak. We know that it's there and it's listening, but it can't speak, right? Other than
Yeah.
we have heard it say like a yes when Cobel asks, "Are you there?" And then you just hear like yes. So it could barely speak.
Mhm.
I think that she's gonna find whoever that board is, and I think it might be like you stated, um, Kier or one of them. Like the board is gonna be down there. That's what I think. Maybe.
Ooh. Interesting. Interesting. I like that. I like that. That Cobel is actually going to contact the board directly, and that's what she's searching for underground. I like that. That's very interesting. I could totally see that being the case. Yeah. Yeah, what do you guys think of the chat? Is the board actually comprised up of physical people? And if so, how many and who? Or is the board AI? Again, the AI, the board being AI has become a pretty big theory among the fandom. I know a lot of people definitely think it is AI. Pug Dog says AI broski. Maybe it is. Maybe it is AI broski. I think they're not physical. They live in Natalie. Now, that's an interesting one. That's one I haven't heard before. That the board are actually inside Natalie. We do see that Natalie seems to be one of, if not the only one, that is able to kind of contact the board directly, right in her ear. So that's an interesting one, Keith, that maybe Natalie herself is the only direct tie to the board, that they're inside her in some manner. Maybe Natalie is, has multiple different severances in her. Maybe she is severed herself and she's got the board in her head. That could be an interesting way to play it. But no, that's an interesting one, Keith. I haven't heard that one before, and I always like hearing some new theories. So good stuff. Very good stuff. I think the board could be AI, and it speaks to Natalie, which is who she sends to interpret them. Yeah, I mean, whoever the board is, it seems like Natalie has this kind of unlimited kind of 24/7 access to the board, where not everybody else does. We do see even Helena. When actually the very last time we saw Cobel on the show, and she was approaching Helena, and she ran away in fear from Helena and his creepy beard-looking bodyguard. That was the last time we saw not only Cobel, but that was also the last time we saw the board get referenced, where we see Helena pick up her phone and she says, "Natalie, is the board available at this time?" She doesn't directly contact the board herself. She has to contact Natalie to see if the board is available at that time. So yeah, I mean, I think that's interesting that maybe Natalie is the only one that has this direct connection to the board. I think that's an interesting idea.
Ah.
I like that.
Also, you know what, Sevis? This is a great idea. Amazing, as always. But also, Sevis, let's remember that Natalie, when she's talking to Milkshake, and Milkshake is wanting her to say something negative about the paintings, looks at him like popping out her eyes and kind of like telling him without
Yeah.
saying anything, like, don't say
Yes.
anything, right? The board is always listening. So wouldn't that be
Yep.
perfect? The board is always listening because they're in my head. Like they're
Oh my
literally right here
God.
with us.
Oh
Don't
my
say anything
God.
to me.
Yes. No, that could totally fit. That could totally be why Natalie was so hesitant to give Milchick even an inch when he is approaching her. And he's, she can definitely tell he's desperately crying out for help here. That's a cry for help, what Milchick is doing there. And he's doing it to the one person that he knows has been through the same experience he has been through, because she has also received these paintings. So nobody knows what Milchick is feeling inside other than Natalie. So you can see it's like this is such a big cry for help on Milchick's part, where he's trying so hard to connect with somebody on a deeper level at Lumen and have that ally that he can maybe trust. And yeah, it's almost like she has that look in her eye where she wants to give him that, but she knows she can't, because it's like there's always somebody watching, or like you guys said, there's always somebody listening, because the board is literally always in her head. That's an interesting one, guys. I like that. I think that's a very, very interesting theory. Good stuff. Very, very good stuff. Yeah, AI is all the rage right now. Of course, it's AI. Again, AI is very popular. It is a very, very popular one right now. A lot of people think the AI is the board. It's a very popular theory. Ultimately, I think the goal is for the board's essence added into the baby implant. Interesting. Interesting. That's an interesting idea. Maybe. Maybe. It's alive. Remind you of something? It does. It reminds me of Frankenstein. Absolutely. Which again, that was probably my favorite Severance video I've ever done. And it's fun every once in a while to just kind of strap on the tinfoil hat and dive into some of these rabbit holes and have fun with some of these topics. It's okay to do that every once in a while. And we do that here often. You got to have fun with shows like this. It's okay to kind of take it into weird places every once in a while. And I had so much fun making that video. So if anybody is a little interested and wants to maybe learn a little bit more about the very strange and deep connections that Severance shares with Frankenstein, and in particular Kier Eagan and Victor Frankenstein, definitely check out that video. I think you'll find some interesting things in there that were pretty fun to make. It was a fun video.
I love
I think
that
Jamie.
video.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
Love that video. But also, before we move on,
Please.
something that is like super specific about the board that we all know is that when we do hear the board, it's this staticky, almost somebody trying to speak to make up a word, but it's not like that.
Yes.
Who else does that, Sevis? Frankenstein. When Frankenstein
Yeah.
first is brought to life, he does that thing where he's like trying to make up a sentence, but he can't really speak. And it sounds just like the board.
Interesting. I didn't even think of that. I wish I would have remembered that when I did my video. Fuck. Good stuff. Very good stuff. Yeah, you might not think that Frankenstein and Severance have a whole lot of common just looking at them on the surface. But then when you look a little bit deeper and you look at some of, in particular, Kier's parallel with Victor Frankenstein, and how they are arguably the same person going after the same goals with the same motivations and the same kind of manipulation tactics. There's so many similarities there between Victor Frankenstein and Kier, that I think it'll surprise some people if you hear Frankenstein and Severance and you think, oh, they can't be that similar. I promise you, there's some very interesting things there, even down to this very painting we have on the background of our stream right here as well, being a direct homage to a Mary Shelley Frankenstein cover to one of her books. The painting is a direct homage to it. But no, I like that idea that that the board is in Natalie's head, or that Natalie herself is the board. I mean, that's a possibility as well. That Natalie herself is a little bit more than we think. Maybe she isn't just this middle management secretary that has a high clearance. Because we saw even during Helena's first meeting when she returned to Lumen after being uncovered, Natalie was one of the ones who was telling her she needs to go back to the Severance floor. And you would think that a mere secretary that has access to the board wouldn't have that kind of pull, that kind of sway to be able to tell Helena what to do. But she does. She kind of does in a way. So yeah, I mean, Natalie's pretty high up there. She seems like she's got a good deal of power at Lumen for sure. So maybe she's a little bit more than just the intermediary. Maybe there's a little more going on there. Maybe, yeah, she wears an earbud though, and she does. But maybe that could be part of the cover for all we know. Who knows? Who knows? It was James Egan's voice. Yeah, again, I think the James Egan one is probably the most likely scenario where it's simply just James Egan that is doing this. That is the board. I think that's probably the most likely outcome. But yeah, who knows? Who knows? The board is a council like the UN, and that's also a possibility as well. If the board is made up of humans and it's not some kind of AI construct, how many humans make up the board? Is it 1, 2, 4, 10 even? Is it a whole council, as you say? Maybe it is. Usually a board of directors is multiple people, around a dozen people or so, usually is a full kind of board of directors meeting. It's usually never 1, 2, or a few people. It's usually a good 10, 12 people, high level, big time investors that control the entire company, the money of the company. That is the board. So yeah, I could totally see there being a whole full-fledged board that is controlling Lumen. That's definitely a possibility, especially considering how big and how they are a multinational conglomerate. That would a corporation of that size sometimes can't be run by just one person. You need a board of advisors to properly kind of balance things out, I guess. But who knows? Who knows what's
I
going
like
on with this
that.
freaking board?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I also like that Xavier specifically mentions the UN, the
Yes.
United Nations. We know that um, um, Severance, right? Like they have offices, they say in all of these countries that we don't even have that amount of that number of countries. However, the specific thing about the UN being the government, if you're going to have something like Severance, I like the idea that it's the government itself that has to be involved in the board because they're doing this, like this is a major thing that they're doing to humanity. So I like the idea that once you dig a little deeper, it goes all the way to the top and it's actually government officials who are the board of this company.
I could totally see that being the case. And that's one thing I've always wondered, why the government doesn't play a more active role in Lumen, or at least trying to acquire more of Lumen. Because you would have to imagine, if this kind of technology like Severance did actually exist, every government on the face of this planet would be doing everything in their power to try and gain control of that technology, to try and give their nation an edge over the others. Every government would want this Severance technology. So I did always wonder, that is there a possibility that if you do go up high enough, this is government controlled to a certain extent? I mean, if not, it almost like wouldn't make sense if they're not either government controlled, or if the government isn't actively trying to get control of them, and there's a little bit of a tug of war going on there. Because I have to imagine the government would want their hands on something like Severance to control it.
Of course, it would give you the perfect army. It would give you soldiers that are soldiers and nothing else, that are perfect, down to the very last bit of being a soldier and a warrior. So, if you are a country, right, then that's what you would want. You will want an army of soldiers, workers, employees that are ready at all times. And we do see that depicted in a lot of the paintings where why does Kier have an army? It makes no sense. But even in the Kier pardons his defectors, um,
Mhm.
he has an army behind him of people, like a battalion. And it's like, why would you need one? You're a company. You are an ether company. Why would you need an army yourself? You're not a country.
Yeah, yeah. Very good point. Very good point. Yeah, why does this private corporation need their own standing army, like like a shady defense contractor, or a private contractor that operates completely outside of the rule of law and get away with heinous shit on a daily basis? Yeah, I mean, you would have to think the government would have a vested interest in trying to control the severance technology and trying to control the direction of where this severance technology is going to go. Because, like you said, that's what it is. It gives them the ultimate control. Something like this, a technology like this, that could be applied in all those ways that you just mentioned. Soldiers, the perfect workers. Imagine the perfect obedient soldier that didn't feel fear, that doesn't have a connection to their family, that doesn't have emotions clouding their judgment or anything like that. It's you can create the perfect army, the perfect workforce, the perfect everything, really. So yeah, you can totally understand that, if this thing was real, the government would definitely have a vested interest in it, for sure. I mean, they just would. And maybe that's something we'll see at some point. Maybe we'll get to a point on the show. I'm surprised they haven't introduced that aspect yet. But I was wondering if at some point they will introduce the idea that the government either already has a stake in Lumen, or the government is actively trying to gain a stake in Lumen. I feel like something's missing on the show without that government kind of oversight. And we've already seen some small connections to the government. We know the senator. We see the senator in Severance, and we see the senator's wife in particular, how she is severed. She has a severance chip inside of her for the purpose of giving birth. So she can switch to her innie to go through all of this pain and trauma and this grueling labor of delivering this baby, only to switch back out to the outie so the outie can reap all the benefits, and the innie never gets to hold the child that they bore for all that time. It's super kind of sad and dark. But we have already seen a small instance where senators are actively getting involved in the severance chips. So yeah, maybe the government is already involved in some kind of way, because we do know severance is legal in some states, but it's illegal in some other states in the world of severance. But yeah, maybe there is already a vested government interest attached somewhere, and maybe that's where the senator and his wife comes in. Maybe the senator is the go-between between Lumen and the government. Maybe.
Wow. That's true. I didn't remember that. So there is precedent for this government theory, as they made it such a big deal about the senator, right? Like we kind of saw their story for a bit. And also, when they go into Irving's home, there's a newspaper article about the specific
Yeah.
senator and his stance or his
Yes.
fight for severance.
That's right.
So
That's right.
that is so true. I didn't remember that. So they have talked about government and severance specifically and the government's push towards it.
Yeah, I mean, I remember only seeing it in a newspaper article. There was some kind of newspaper that one of the characters was holding up. It says, severance legal in yada yada of yada yada states, and such of so many states that severance is legal or something. So yeah, we know that it's legal in some states, it's illegal in some other states. But like you said, the senator could be that telltale sign where maybe the government is already involved to a certain extent, where they're overseeing the technology, or at the very least, they have access to the technology to use it in their kind of own applied science division, whether it's soldiers or creating the perfect workers or all of the other numerous different functions that you could use a technology like this for, to, especially if you are a government. Yeah, definitely. Definitely could see the government already being involved, and yeah, maybe the senator is that connection there for sure. And yeah, Xavier brings up an interesting point. The government is on board because they haven't been raided or investigated by the feds yet. That's a good point as well. I mean, if Severance was real and the company of Lumen was actively trying to keep the government out, then you best believe the government and Lumen, they would be at each other's throats. The government would be trying to, do everything they can to come up with excuses to raid their facilities, to put them under investigation and things like that. If Lumen wasn't playing ball, you probably would see a little bit more of a kind of friction there between the two. But if this senator is already cozying up with Lumen and has his own wife chipped, yeah, you start to think that maybe the government already has a hand in the pie, for sure, for sure. Underrated series is Incorporated. Big companies have become the government. Incorporated was good and was an interesting show. Yeah, I've never seen Incorporated. I know what it is, but I've never actually sat down and watched it. Maybe I should check it out at some point. Have you ever seen Incorporated?
No, never heard of it, but the chat who knows all is always right. So I'm gonna look for it and I'll watch it.
Yeah, yeah, we'll check it out. We'll definitely check it out. And if it's anything similar to Severance, which if memory serves, it's kind of a similar deal. Not in terms of the Severance program, but in terms of corporations and government kind of merging. Yeah. Yeah, no, I'll check out Incorporated, definitely. Again, as PM just mentioned, anytime the chat mentions or recommends a show or a movie, 9 times out of 10, it's really, really good. Cheesy but good. Hey, it's nothing wrong with a little bit of
Love
cheese every
cheese.
once in a while. I like me some cheese. I like me a little bit of cheese. I am Italian after all. I like some cheese. Yeah, no, I'm gonna check it out. I'm gonna check out Incorporated for sure. Definitely, I'm gonna check that one out. You guys usually always have good recommendations. Lumen might actually be a very new and small company, and everything we see is just fake grandeur. Now, that's a very interesting point as well, Keith. I mean, everything that we know about Lumen, this long history of Kier going back to the 1800s and all this crazy stuff, all of that does tend to come from employees telling it to innies. So yeah, I mean, how much concrete information is there really? We know Lumen is a massive company. Um, Even the orientation video, how much of that are we to take at face value? How much of it is just the fake grandeur or just propaganda to make it seem like this company is larger than life when really maybe it's not so large? So that's actually an interesting idea that maybe Lumen isn't as ancient and big and powerful as we think. Maybe it is a smaller company. Maybe some of the history has been fabricated to kind of create this aura around the company and to also create the idea where your severed employees will worship this company. What's the best way to get your employees to worship you? Well, portray yourself like you're this larger than life religious type organization that is bestowing all of these great kind of perks and gifts upon their workers because it's so benevolent, when really it could be totally different than that. So that's an interesting idea, Keith, that maybe Lumen and Kier and the Eagans, maybe they're not as old as we think. Maybe this company isn't what we think. Maybe some of it is just built up propaganda. That's possible. That's possible.
I like it. It really could be anything at this point. I tend to agree
Yeah.
with like Alpha Rum. I do see them as the Rockefellers. I see them as the
Yeah.
Rockefellers because we
Okay.
see a world where there is technology that hasn't advanced, specifically
Yeah.
technology that doesn't pertain to Lumen. We also see a gala.
Yes.
Now, when you look at this gala, it looks
Yes.
very expensive. It looks like it is attended by very important people. The way that she films her apology, it is a public service announcement, the way a Rockefeller would when they have done
Mm-hmm.
something, right, that is important to a lot of people, not just a little bit of people who are invested in the company, but like the world
Yeah.
at large. So I tend to think, yeah, Rockefeller sounds right. It just sounds like it fits
I
Lumen.
like that. I do like that. I think that's actually a really good one too, because it does have that kind of Rockefeller kind of status to it, where, like you said, they are doing these galas, all these functions. They do have at least a little bit of a big presence. Yeah, maybe some of their history is a little bit fudged, but they do tend to seem like they are a legit multinational corporation. But I do like the idea that maybe they don't stretch back as far as we think. Maybe they don't go all the way back to the 1800s. Starry brings up maybe it was just 20 years, like Field said. Yeah, maybe
Hmm.
maybe it's a little similar to that, where Lumen is not hundreds of years old, but it's just decades old. That could potentially be a possibility.
I
Yeah,
like it. And
great
it's
stuff.
an in between. It's an in
Yeah,
between from the chat that knows all, a good compromise, because as we
yeah,
know, they are liars. That was
Yes.
not the tallest waterfall and all of these things that there was no parade. There was like none of the sort.
No
So a
parade.
good in between, a good compromise because Lumen
Yeah.
does lie.
Hmm. Crazy stuff. Crazy, crazy stuff. Please walk me through the first time Gemma wakes up in the dentist room or the airplane or Xmas room. Yeah, well, I mean, I think the first time we see her as the audience, if that's what you mean, the first time we see her as the audience, I believe it is the dentist room. I believe we see her. Yeah, we see her. Actually, no, we see her wake up as regular Gemma. She wakes up as just as Gemma Prime in her X-Men outfit, as people call it, with the nurse, and they're conducting some kind of test. And then we see her go in, get dressed for her first room or first persona of the day, which ends up being this one here, as she goes into the Wellington room, which is the creepy dentist. So the first time we see Gemma is her preparing for the dentist room, to get into this dentist room and to see if this pain that she is going through, and in my opinion, after we hear Drummond say later on in the episode that a big part of these rooms, of all of these different rooms, is to see what will and won't transcend the severance barrier. So I get the feeling that's what this room was for, was to put Gemma just through pain, put her through physical pain, to see how much of that pain and how much does she remember of that pain carry over from her to the other Gemma personalities, what transcends the severance barrier. And we hear them say that she's not remembering from room to room, which tells them that the technology is working. The severance barrier is holding. Things aren't being carried over from one to the other. But then again, that's if Gemma is telling the truth. Could Gemma potentially be remembering a little bit more than she's saying, and she just doesn't want to be honest out of fear? She's telling them what they want to hear, so they think they're getting their desired results. I mean, if I was Gemma and I was actually remembering from room to room, I probably wouldn't tell them either. I'd go along with it to try and survive and think up with a better plan to eventually escape. But you got to buy your time to do that, and best way to buy time is to make it seem like you're going along with the program. Who knows?
Yeah,
Who
and we do
knows?
see her have emotions to the outfits. I think you're right.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
like that idea, and I wouldn't be surprised if that ends up being in fact true because she does have reactions to the outfits, and that shouldn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
If the severance barrier is working, as Drummond said, then it should not have that effect where she looks at the outfit and she knows. It's almost, she said it in a way where she was like, I know what I'm about to do. I know what this
Yeah,
means, right? She shouldn't remember anything. And she does it not only with the pain. At first, I thought maybe it's the physical pain because this is the outfit she goes to the dentist in. But she also does it with the
yeah.
Christmas cards.
Yes.
So,
True. True. Yeah, I mean, maybe. Yeah, maybe. Maybe there is a little bit more there. Maybe there's a little bit more that she's carrying from room to room, and maybe she's just playing ball, telling them what she thinks they want to hear, kind of deal. That very well could be the possibility for sure. Yeah, great stuff as always. Do we think this is actual Gemma or a clone? Says Override. I think it's actual Gemma. I do think it's actual Gemma. I don't think it's a clone. I do think Miss Casey is very kind of robotic and very kind of limited in her functions and her kind of human skills and her experience. But I do tend to think Gemma is Gemma. She's just been severed so many times. Like her Gemma persona has been severed so many different times for so many of these different rooms. We know she faced 6 rooms just in this one episode alone, and that's just over the course of one day or maybe a week or something like that. Who knows how many rooms she's actually been faced with during the years that she's been held by Lumen. So how many Gemma personalities are actually in there? I mean, is there a limit to how much you can sever a brain before it just snaps, before it just breaks, before your psyche just completely shatters? Is there a limit to how many severed personalities you can create in one person? Or is it one of those things where they can just create this endless amount of all of these other Gemmas while also having this one Miss Casey persona at the same time. That's one thing that I always wonder. Is there a limit to how many times you can sever one brain before it ultimately snaps?
That's really scary to think about. Because if they're
Yeah,
doing that to Gemma, then does that mean that eventually she will be discarded? Especially in the
yeah,
scene where Drummond tells the creepy dentist, "You're gonna have to say goodbye to her." Something
yeah.
tells me it's not because they're gonna open the door and let her live a
And let
happy
it
life
go.
in the human world.
Uh,
Like
yes.
they're gonna it makes me think they're going to get rid of her body. Or they're gonna discard of Gemma. And maybe that is what they are testing. That's a great question. How many different severed innies can you have before it's too much? In order to know, you have to test. You have to test on a human. A lot of
Yeah.
us thought that that's what the baby goats were for, so that you could test on
Yes.
them.
Yeah.
And it makes
Hmm.
more sense now that we have seen a little bit of what goes on to Gemma. It makes a lot more sense. I know that we never went back to it with the goat man. Now I'm doubling down, guys. They,
Love it.
they
I
are hurting
love it.
them. They are hurting the
They
goats.
better not be hurting these dang goats. I swear, if they're hurting these dang goats, I am not going to be happy with my good friend Brienne of Tarth.
She's
Yeah,
doing it.
hopefully not. Yeah, I don't think she's doing it either. Yeah, she seems like she cares about. Yeah, we saw her goat people protecting the goats. They didn't want to give up the goats. So if they
Mm-mm.
know that this is happening to the goats, they do seem to be protective of them. So yeah, Gwen, you're safe. Um, yeah, I mean, I hope they're not screwing with these damn goats. Poor goats. They're not old enough yet. Get
I
away,
mean, they're
get
doing
away.
it with that Gemma. They're
They
using a
are.
human being
They
and
are.
torturing this human being by making them
They
go to
are.
the dentist every 6 weeks, by making
Uh,
her do things that she clearly is very uncomfortable,
yep.
terrified, and traumatized by. So, what happens with major companies? Before you do it on a human or you try your product technology on a human, you usually have done animal testing, which is wrong, immoral, but it's a
Very.
fact, right? Like they do animal testing. And so it makes me think they're hurting the goat. Not funny when they're severed, so that they could see if the severance barrier holds and that goat doesn't remember the pain or the feelings. Especially when you
Yeah.
said that they mentioned feelings can transcend the barrier.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like certain things can transcend the severance barrier, and I think we've seen a few examples of this. Dan Erickson, the creator of the show himself, talks about Helena's feelings for Mark potentially being one of those things that transcends the severance barrier, that Helena is feeling the very strong connection that Helly has with Mark, and it's carrying over from Innie to Outie. And we also saw a very clear representation of this in episode 4 this season of John Turturro's character of Irving. And even John Turturro himself has confirmed this in an interview where he talks about the reason that Annie Irving remained so suspicious of Helly, and this night gardener statement that she made. Like he just couldn't get over the fact that there was a gardener out there at night. Something about that just didn't compute for Irving. And in an interview, John Turturro states that the reason why he was so relentless in his pursuit of trying to find out what was really going on with Helly and why he ultimately uncovered Helly as Helena was because it was his Audie's training transferring over to his Innie. Like his Innie was
Mm.
tapping into the training that his Audie has. Innie Irving has no training. He has no
Mm-mm.
military training. He has no investigative skills or anything like that. He's just an Innie MDR worker. But Audie Irving definitely seems to have some kind of training, according to the actor John Turturro. And it was that training that he attributes Innie Irving to tapping into as to why he uncovered Helly, why he remained so suspicious of Helly and the Night Gardener statement. It was the training carrying over from one subconscious to the other. So yeah, some things can transcend the severance barrier, and maybe that's more
Mm.
evidence to the fact that Gemma is lying a little bit. Maybe Gemma is remembering some of these things from room to room, and she's just telling Lumen she isn't, because we've seen actual examples of the severance barrier being transcended before. So yeah, very good point, guys. Very, very
That
good
makes a
point.
lot of sense. I really like that, Jeremy. Also, because when we see the question being asked, now that I remember, um, what you said makes perfect sense. When the creepy dentist asked her about the rooms and like what room did you feel pain in and all of this stuff, she answers what I think that she believes he wants to hear, and then immediately asks, "When do I get to see Mark?" That's something
Yeah,
you would do if you're like, "I'm just
yeah,
gonna give you the answer you want. When do I get out of here? I'm all better
yeah,
now. I don't
true.
remember anything. When do I get to see Mark?" It was
Yeah,
immediately after that, like, "I gave you the answer that you want. Can I please see Mark?"
yeah, yeah. It could potentially fit where, yeah, she's kind of just telling telling them what, what she thinks they want to hear. And yes, love Helene. Yeah, you got that, Scotty. I totally said Helene. I totally said Helene instead of Helly. Helene. Yeah, you got me, my friend. um and yes, we see this. You will see the world, and the world will see you. Gemma Severs sent into the world to complete some mission like live marketing advertising. And that's what led me to believe that all of this is happening in preparation for Lumen to roll out the Severance program to the general public. And I know quite a few of you have mentioned this in the past. I know Pam Jam mentioned it a while back in terms of like, you can offer the Severance program to just your average everyday civilian. And it could be used for everything from dental procedures, medical procedures, childbirth, as we've seen. Anything that a human goes through that is a little bit painful, a little bit arduous, a little bit taxing, that could cause some kind of trauma, they could offer severance as a method to get through all of these things. Like if they can make severance available and mass market it to the general public, that would ultimately get them one step closer to completing their ultimate goal, which we heard right from James Eagan himself at the end of season 1, where he straight up says his dream is to have an entire world of people that are all chipped. He wants the entire world to be chipped. And how do you get the entire world to be chipped and not just your employees? Well, you find some way to refine this technology where you can offer it in a multitude of different manners, and you roll it out to the public. And maybe that's why they have cozied up to people like the senator. Maybe that's why they have probably cultivated other relationships with people in the government, so they can make it a little bit easier to pass something like this into law to make it available to the public. And I think that's why the rebellion against Lumen is so prevalent, and why the government, the rebellion, is fighting so hard against them, because maybe they know that is the ultimate plan. Maybe the ultimate plan is to roll this technology out to the general public. And who knows what that could ultimately entail? Who knows what Lumen could ultimately do to these chips? What kind of fail safes, what kind of backdoors they can write into these chips? If James Eagan wants the entire world chipped, he's certainly not doing it out of the kindness of his heart so people can have a less painful surgery. There's something more nefarious going on there. There's a reason he wants everybody chipped. They almost like they are going to utilize that in some way. It's actually kind of the perfect way to control the world, control world leaders, presidents, kings. You have everybody chipped, and you have the control to kind of dictate who this person is, how they think. That is the ultimate control over everybody. And it's kind of scary to think that Lumen could be going for something that massive, that their goal could potentially be that big. But again, we hear James Eagan say very clearly he wants everybody on the planet chipped. That is his dream. And maybe this whole Cold Harbor thing, and maybe that's why we hear Drummond say to Milchick earlier in the season that the work that Mark is doing on Cold Harbor will be remembered as some of the most important work in human history. And if this is that big, that could totally fit that bill, where if completing Cold Harbor is a series of tests, a series of experiments that will kind of ensure that the Severance chip is ready to be rolled out to the general public, then yeah, you could totally understand why Cold Harbor is this important to Lumen. It's literally everything they're planning for. So yeah, I could totally see the end game being them trying to roll out Severance to the public for sure.
Wow. Now that you say that, it kind of makes another connection. So connecting a couple of different things, right? In the book that Dr. Ricken put out, he has an entire chapter about bees, about how bees are the perfect worker because you have a queen bee and you have the entire colony of bees just working for that one specific queen bee. They also communicate with each other and they just perform their duty, their job, right? Um,
Yeah.
and when we look at the screen of the different commands available for the people who are severed, there is one that says beehive. Talking about the whole world being chipped and working for just one person makes a lot of sense when you put it into the perspective of communities or societies that are sort of functioning in that manner, where it literally will be the entire population working for just one person. And to call it beehive makes me think that maybe they would like chip everybody, and beehive is just activating you all
A
work for
hive
me now.
mind, a
Yes.
big hive mind. Yes, you're totally right. Yeah, because yeah, we see all those other commands, all these other weird commands that we're not quite sure what they mean, what they stand for, but they all have some kind of function, obviously, and they obviously they're all related to the chip. And you see things on there. I'll pull it up here. I know I have it in one of these. Let me pull it up. We have all these different interesting commands, and there's quite a few theories for some of them, what they could potentially be. But yes, beehive is right there at the top of them. But we also see a bunch of others. Branch transfer, I remember, is one. And yeah, I've always wondered, what exactly is this for? What exactly is up with all of these other commands that we still to this point don't quite know what they mean, but definitely have a feeling that they are important nonetheless in some way, shape, or form. But yeah, I like that. Beehive could potentially be the ultimate, and maybe that's why it's all the way up there at the top, the very first command listed, because it's the most important one ultimately. And that's what they want. They want a ultimate beehive. They can have everybody on the world chipped and know that they can tap into these chips, build some kind of back door into these chips that allows them to ultimately control people. And yeah, you could imagine that, a whole world, one giant hive mind, all working towards Lumen's goal, to whatever Lumen's goal is, a whole planet of people chipped working towards that end. That is a nightmare. That is end of world, end of days kind of stuff, for sure. Super spooky.
Spooky.
Super spooky.
Super spooky. And it would totally change the world. So what they say in a way is not incorrect about this will be remembered as the most important work
Yep.
to humanity because it would forever change humanity. Now, I would like to point out in your video that you put out today, which I love, branch transfer. You describe a possibility
Yep.
for what branch transfer means. And if we notice like how it is, beehive is the ultimate goal, but right before then is branch transfer. So you would need to write transfer Kier's person or like a soul. I don't know like what is left if his body is not there.
Yeah.
Kier's essence to another body. And then after
Yep.
he is transferred to that body, then he can control the beehive and you would activate beehive.
Oof. 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 Man, oh man, oh man. Yeah, what is up with the rest of these commands? Yeah, branch transfer always reminded me of that kind of transfer of consciousness kind of thing, where I know there's a big fan theory going around that Lumen's ultimate goal is to resurrect Kier. And while I do think that's an interesting theory, and while I was kind of on board with that theory at one point too, I've recently started shifting a little bit more to the whole roll it out to the general public thing. I feel like that's a loftier goal for Lumen. I feel like them just doing all this just to resurrect Kier is interesting. It definitely is very much possible, but yeah, I don't know. I love the idea of them, doing all of this so they can roll this out to the general public and sever everyone and have that beehive, like you mentioned. Or maybe it's both. Maybe it's a little bit of both. Maybe it's they want to do the whole beehive thing and bring back Kier so they can bring back Kier and hand him this ultimate power upon resurrection. If Kier is this giant, Messiah-like figure, which they portray him to be, and all of these employees worship Kier. All we hear is for Kier, for Kier, for Kier, praise Kier. So yeah, could that potentially be two of their two main goals, to bring back Kier, but then when you bring him back, you have this ultimate gift of an entire world of chipped people that he owns, essentially his hive mind, to do his bidding. Super dark, super creepy, but I love it. I love it. And yeah, we have clean slate, which could potentially be wiping all of an innie's or an outie's memories. A lot of people think that clean slate is that, and some people actually think that that's already what happened to Innie Irving, that Innie Irving is already gone, that he has been just completely wiped. There's no Innie Irving left. And that's a possibility. That is definitely a possibility, but seeing all of these different codes, it lets you know that there are other functions for the Severance chip, which means they're actively working on ways to utilize this chip in other ways. So yeah, what are some of these other codes for? What are they going to do? What else can the Severance chip do? Because I always thought it was a little too small for a technology this big that could be applied in all of these different ways that it could be applied towards. For them to only be using it for employees, to create their own employees, while it's definitely dark and it's kind of creating that perfect workforce and it is super kind of authoritarian, you start to wonder, like, is that really all they're trying to do with these Severance chips? Or is that just stage one? Build the Severance chip, get the Severance program out there so we could, have that first phase done. And then we move on to phase two, which is applying this technology into other areas of the world to further our dominance. Essentially, that is ultimately what Lumen wants, the world domination. So yeah, no, I love that idea that maybe they're kind of diving into this crazy shit to roll this out to the general public. Crazy.
I love that. I love the way that you connected those two things, because it's not just industry. I think you're 100% correct. This is not just industry. This is not just, I want the perfect worker. It goes beyond that, because we do get so much of this religious indoctrination with Kier. And what do a lot of cults and religions and what people hold on to as a religion have in common? They have in common this want or belief of a second coming of that leader. It's always the leader was here, the leader existed, they gave us their teachings, and there is this faith that you will see them again, that you will get to live in their presence. So it would make sense, all of the religious teachings that Kier kind of indoctrinates within the company, to be this second coming of Kier, a branch transfer, and then to hand him his beehive, the entire world in his image, created in his image. It would completely fit with all of the religious things that we have seen in the show. And when you mentioned branch transfer in your video, what I loved about that is that when I saw branch transfer, I thought there's no need for that if we just think about corporations when they transfer you to another branch. We saw that the Audi version of the people that they brought in for Mark on the first episode to work with him, the Audis knew and moved from one state or from one place to the other. They got an apartment and he was upset about that. So you don't really need the Innie to do any work. You're going to get the Audi to move so you don't need the Innie to be branch transferred necessarily. But I really love the idea of a body. And when I looked it up, like, there are branches of the body that are referred to as that: the mind, your physical self, your DNA. They call them branches. So I love it. It makes sense to me. Yeah.
It's definitely an interesting theory, if nothing else. I mean, it could potentially be this this giant, just incredibly complicated, complex plan that they've been planning for Lord knows how long to ultimately get to this just what seems to be unattainable goal, but getting closer and closer to it each year with each new kind of breakthrough they get with these severance chips. And it seems like the only way they get these breakthroughs are to have these kind of experiments that they're having right now with Gemma and Mark and Cold Harbor and all these other case files that they've already put her through. Yeah, they could be building to something pretty big. Pretty big indeed. And yes, and I agree with this. I feel like the goldfish and elephant would be opposite functions, giving their opposite memory traits. Exactly. A goldfish remembers things for a few seconds and then forgets it. Its memory kind of resets every few seconds. Yet an elephant sees something and remembers it for life. They never forget it. Elephants have one of, if not the best memories on the face of this planet. They see something and they just do not forget it. And not just sights, smells, sounds, all of it. Elephants are so clever. They see, smell, and hear, and remember it for life. So yeah, I could totally see that being two kind of opposite functions, where you got the goldfish brain and you got the elephant brain. Literally two opposite functions, where one is meant to forget and the other is meant to remember ultimately. So yeah, I definitely agree there. I like that. I like that. In my opinion, they would never give control up of any Irving. Once you're chipped, they have control of you. They just have to get you in that elevator again. And that's why I kind of want to hold on to hope that any Irving is still around somewhere, because, like you said, there's always this slight possibility that maybe they'll need any Irving. If they're already invested in watching Audi Irving, which they very much seem to be, we got Drummond breaking into Audi Irving's house while he's at dinner with Burton Fields. So clearly Lumen is watching Audi Irving. They're watching him. They want to know what he's doing. They probably want to know who he's working with, who he's communicating with in these weird, mysterious telephone calls. And if you're this invested in finding out who Irving is and who he's working with, wouldn't you want to have that failsafe in the back of your mind, knowing that at any point you can switch him over to his innie and at the very least disorient him or kind of combat whatever plan that he's planning? So I think that's a good idea, Quan, and I do tend to lean a little bit more that way, where even though Innie Irving is gone right now, I don't think he's completely erased. I do get the feeling that if they wanted to swap him back over, they still could, because again, it's a perfect fail-safe tool to keep Irving from ultimately doing anything too damaging to the company. If they're already investigating Irving, thinking that he might be a threat, wouldn't you want to have that fail-safe in the back of your mind to know I can switch him over to his Innie at any moment and neutralize him? So yeah, I think he's still there. I think Innie Irving isn't completely erased. That's kind of what I think too. Good stuff, Kwon. Good stuff. Why give up that control, Why give up that control? Now, yeah, this is another interesting one, and I've kind of thought a little bit. I haven't thought too much about it, but I did kind of stop and think a little bit about what was going on there. Please talk about how one of the rooms turned into an airplane ride with Gemma and the Doctor. I feel like we're overlooking this, and yeah, it is kind of super weird, isn't it? Like, and a lot of people, some people still think that episode 4 wasn't really outside, that they never really went outside, that the whole outdoor experience was just one giant virtual reality or one giant simulation that they plugged the innies into, which I suppose could potentially be possible. It could help, explain a few weird things that happen on their way to Woes Hollow, like the weird, creepy shadow twins just popping up, like the TV literally just appearing out of thin air, where one minute it's not there, and the next minute, boom, the TV's right there with Milchick on it. So there is some weird things that are kind of unexplainable that a augmented reality or a simulated reality could potentially explain. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, what exactly is going on here in this scene? Let me bring this up.
I always thought it was like maybe
What did you
just
think?
setting up a stage, like you set up an airplane setting and you can choose when she turns on into this innie. So maybe it's right at the door. So you don't necessarily need to build an outside scenario with an airplane. You just need the seats and that specific place where she's going to be strapped into the seat. and maybe she just goes into the innie self right at the door for this airplane. They don't necessarily need to build the entire thing, just like a set design, perhaps.
Yes. Yes. I could totally see that being the case where really all they need is an airplane and a big warehouse or one of their floors. I mean, Lumen's a big building. We have no idea how far underground Lumen goes, how many floors there are down there, and what else could be there. So yeah, something like this could be a little bit easier to fake than you might think. All you do is grab a plane, and with a company like Lumen, I imagine they could easily make it look like these windows are actually appearing it like you are outside in the sky. And then you literally just have this plane in a freaking warehouse, in a freaking floor somewhere, just on a crane, and you're just shaking it around like it's a ride, like it's a roller coaster ride. Just a completely fake way of simulating a airplane crash. So no, that's definitely a possibility. Definitely a possibility, because I get the feeling it's not a real plane. I mean, it could be. It looks pretty convincing, even to the point where we see the doctor smack up to the freaking ceiling. That is something you would see for some if a plane was going down and experiencing some kind of turbulence and you don't have your seatbelt on. That's what's going to happen. You're going to go smacking back and forth from the ceiling to the floor. That's just gravity messes with you in that sense. But no, I always kind of wondered what exactly was going on here. I never thought too deep about it. Part of me just always thought it was an augmented reality, or it was something like you mentioned, PM. I think you have the right idea where this would be a little easier to fake than you think. You get a fake airplane and you just kind of create the conditions and make it seem like this is the airplane that is going down when really you're on the ground the whole time. So I like that. Yeah, could just be a simple fake. Some clever trickery at the end of the day. Clever trickery, or who knows, maybe they took her really up into an airplane and simulated some kind of crash and then swapped her back over. I mean, that's possible as well. It seems like that's a lot of work for something like this when they could just fake it. But yeah, I tend to agree with PM. I think she's got the right idea. Think she's got the right idea. And yes, PD did write down Orpo on his map. That is very true. Now, does that mean that where he wrote down Orpo, is that potentially the room where the Orpo takes place? Is that some kind of virtual reality or augmented reality kind of room? And that's why PD wrote Orpo there? That's a good question. That's a very good observation, Dude Falco. He does write down Orpo on his little map that he left for Mark. Good stuff. Man, what a show. What a show this is.
Maybe that's where they keep the twins. The creepy, like uncanny valley twins.
Yeah, the
Maybe
creepy
that's
shadow
just the room
twins.
where they
Yeah,
keep the twins, right?
maybe.
No, I'd like to believe that that was a real trip.
Yeah, me too. I like to believe that too. I think it would be more meaningful if it was a real trip that they really took.
Yeah.
Yeah. Making it again, I've never been a big fan of simulation outcomes, just because it can take something that was once very real, very interesting, very kind of magical even at sometimes, and you can kind of just explain it away by just saying, oh, it's just a simple computer algorithm. Sorry, just a simulation. We plugged all of this in. And that's why I've never liked the simulation theory when it pertains to From in particular. That was a pretty popular fan theory among the fandom, like during the beginning. And I always thought that would be such a cheap way to explain all of this wonder and mystery that we're seeing on the show of From, to find out that it was all just one giant simulation, and literally all of this fascinating stuff that we have been seeing is all just a computer algorithm. I just always thought that was a cheap way, lazy writing in a sense, to make the extraordinary all of a sudden seem ordinary. So I've never been a big fan of the simulation outcome. So I hope that's not the case. I do hope that trip was real too.
Yeah, I would actually hate that. And I know that this is not the correct way of thinking about it, but I can't help it. This is just how I feel, you guys. Whenever you go through a story and then it ends up being a simulation, I just feel like they're telling me I just wasted all of your time. You cried
Yes.
for the characters, you
Yes.
love the characters. Like I have cried from when T-Chang like that scene. I cried.
Ah,
I cried my eyes out. So
ah,
that being a simulation just tells me I wasted all of your time. Bye.
I
That's
know.
how it feels like to me. Like everybody's okay and nothing was real.
Yeah,
I
nothing was
don't
real.
like
They were never in
simulations.
danger. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was all just a desired outcome the entire time, and I 100% agree with you. That's my least. When I think of all of the worst ways that a show can end, the ultimate answer being that everything interesting was all just one giant simulation. It does kind of make you feel like you wasted so much time, invested so much time and energy into this story, into these characters, into this weird magical mystical aspects of these things, hoping to find a deeper meaning behind them, only to find out that nope, it was all just a computer algorithm. Nothing, that doesn't mean anything, all just a program. So it is kind of a cheap ending. That would be a cheap ending for me as well, for sure, for sure. Yeah, but TV and films are really just simulations anyway. It's fake. This is a very good point.
True.
Every show we see is technically a simulated reality. So you do have a point there as well.
Touche.
Touche, touche, indeed.
This could be a
Um,
simulation ourselves. Scientists do
right? I
theorize that
agree.
our life, it's a theory within a theory. We theorize about shows and scientists
Yep,
theorize about our life itself. And there is a theory
yep.
that more likely than not, this is all a simulation. And so we
There
hate
is.
simulations, but at the end of the day, we might be one.
It's crazy to think that, yes, I mean, have we been living in the Matrix this entire freaking time? It's a scary thought when you think about it, especially when you hear like actual real physics and real physicists and actual smart
Hmm.
scientists really talk about the simulation theory and the matrix theory and how the probability after so long the probability starts to become more and more likely that we are living in a simulated world. Like it's
Hmm.
super creepy to think that that's a potential possibility, that our thoughts, our ideas, everything we do, everything that happens is preordained, is pre-programmed. It's such a scary feeling to think that. But yeah, circle of theories, circle
Yeah.
of
A
theories
theory within
indeed.
a like theory inception. We are
Yeah,
not real.
theory nesting doll, the theory nesting doll, a theory within a theory
Hmm.
within a theory. Love it, guys. Love it. Yeah, nothing to see here, just a simulation. Yeah, that would be the worst. That would be the worst. But no, honestly, I'm loving where the show is heading so far. It's been so good. I do very much applaud Severance for keeping up their same level quality of storytelling, of cinematography, of writing, of acting. Everything that they poured into season one, they seem to be pouring into season two, and it's getting that same desired result. Very similar outcome. It seems like most of the fans who liked season one are also enjoying season two right now. And right now, we did put up a poll asking you guys in the chat, is season two better than season one? And 72% of you said season two is better than season one. And that is with almost 200 votes. Almost
Wow.
200 of you voted, 180 votes. And we got 72% of you says, yes, season two so far is better than season one. Wow, I gotta say, that was a little bit surprising. I was thinking it was going to be a little bit more even, maybe 60-40, something around there,
Mm.
45-55. But wow, almost quarters of you, almost 75%, almost think season two is better than season one. And that's awesome. I mean, that's great. I mean, how often is it when a season one comes out that is so good, and then season two comes out and it completely matches that or even tops it? It's not that often. I can count on maybe one or two hands the most how many shows I've seen where a season two was better than a season one when season one was like really, really good, like a Game of Thrones and
Mm.
stuff like that. Like for me, Game of Thrones season one is the best season. It always will be the best season. Nothing will ever
Mm.
top season one of Game of Thrones for me personally. But yeah, some shows they do manage to come out there on their second season and just completely step up their game and bring up that same level of storytelling or even top it sometimes. So that is awesome. Awesome stuff,
Mm-hmm.
guys. Awesome stuff. 72%. And yes, I'm right there
Wow.
with you, Quan, as well. 1899 was such a cheap ending. That show just
Yeah.
reinforced my hatred of simulated endings even more. Even more, because 1899 was one of those shows that started off super interesting, super intriguing. You thought it had this kind of mystical, magical aspect to it with this ship and what was happening with this little boy and how he just kept coming back from the dead. Like everything was super creepy. And then you find out that yeah, it's just a simulation. Sorry, guys. It completely ruined that show for me to the point where I was glad it got
Mm.
canceled. And I hate even saying that. I hate saying that I'm glad a show got canceled. I know that might sound cruel, but when I saw that that show was just one giant simulation, and I saw it got canceled, I thought, well, serves you right. You should not have gone that route. It was a horrible idea to do. Horrible idea. Season 2 is more exciting because so much has happened already, been established. And I think that's why people are really liking season 2. And we were talking about this earlier in terms of Severance is really one of those shows that you don't really get a whole lot of filler. Just about every single episode, something happens. At least something happens in just about every episode where you get some good plot progression, a reveal, an answer, setting up a new storyline for the next few episodes. Every single episode seems to give us something at least. And season 2, even more so. Like, I remember when we were just 4 episodes in of season 2, thinking to myself, holy cow, we've already gotten so much content. They've already gotten through so much stuff, and it's only been 4
Mm-hmm.
episodes. We're already at reintegration, and it's only 3 episodes in. So
Mm-hmm.
it is one of those shows that they're making really good use of their screen time. And speaking of screen time, I did look up our next week's episode or Thursday's episode, episode 8, which will be entitled Sweet Vitriol. And I was very shocked to see that it is going to be the shortest episode of Severance ever in history. Episode 8 is only 37 minutes long compared to
Mm.
most Severance episodes. Yeah, crazy. Most Severance episodes are usually 50 to 55 minutes long of actual show. Episode 8 is only 37 minutes. This is the shortest episode of Severance we have ever gotten that is coming up in episode 8. 37 minutes. That I don't know if that worries me or excites
Mm.
me. Like I don't know what's going on, but it's very interesting to see them break their format where if you look at all of the other episode runtimes, they're all right around 50-55 minutes. Again, like I said, it's very weird that all of a sudden episode 8 only 37 minutes. So I guess we'll see.
Wow. That is very
Yeah.
scary. Is it gonna be that
Right?
they're gonna shock us so much and the rest of the time will be used, you know how they do the after show where they talk about the episode? Are they going to
Yeah.
use that for our personal therapy after they traumatize us with whatever they're gonna show us? Comforting
Yes,
us
I
and
love that. Oh my God, I love that. Yes, it's going to be our personal therapy session after the just absolute mind melt they put us through in this next episode. Therapy session. You get a 5-minute wellness session at the end of the episode. Wouldn't that be crazy
yeah.
if it is such a hectic episode and then the last, you get to that last inside the episode thing and it's just Miss Casey giving us, the audience, a wellness session trying to get
Mm.
us through what we just saw? I would love them. I would love
I
to see
would
them do
love
that at some
that.
point. I would
They
love
need to do
that.
that now.
Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, Severance, if you're listening, you can use that one free of charge. Um, yeah, it's been a great show so far. I'm loving season 2, loving where it's going. Cannot wait to see episode 8. Again, episode 8 entitled Sweet Vitriol, which is a nickname for diethyl ether, which we know ether has huge connotations in the world of Severance, with Kier himself working at an ether factory, supposedly, at least according to the Kier lore. So it'll be interesting. Well, it'll be interesting to see what's going to happen with episode 8. Are we going to get a little bit more about Kier and his backstory? Are we going to learn finally a little bit more about Cobel? We know Cobel is making her return in episode 8 at the very least. So I cannot wait, guys. We are just a few days away now. Severance season 2, episode 8, Sweet Vitriol, just a little ways away. And of course, we will be live Thursday night again. 1 hour or so, hour and a half or so before the episode drops, I will be going live with our usual pre-game show as we hang out, talk some Severance predictions, and kill some time while we wait for the new episode to upload. So definitely come back and hang out with us this Thursday for the pre-game show. And then, of course, PM and I will also be live again Saturday, 9 p.m. Eastern, right here on the channel like we are every week, diving into the latest episode. And if you guys haven't already, definitely subscribe to PM Philosophy. The link to her channel is in the description of this stream. And check out some of her Severance content. She's got some great videos up there as well. And thank you again for filling in and joining me this evening.
Well, thank you so much. And holy cowbell. It was so much fun, you guys. The chat that knows all coming up with some really impressive theories. I think that we really kind of figured out Severance, guys, in this whole collaboration. We came up with some things that I never heard before. I'm always so impressed by you guys, really.
Yeah. I am, and that's why I do really love these discussions. The chat, you guys always come up with some interesting, super interesting stuff. And yes, we will definitely be live next Tuesday as well, Joel. Thank you. Yes, absolutely. Every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, we will be live diving into all things Severance. Every Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern, every Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, and every Saturday at 9 p.m. Eastern. Those are our 3 days every single week, live, talking all things Severance. And of course, also my episode breakdowns and trailer breakdowns will also be out every week as well. I dropped my episode 8 trailer breakdown and predictions today. So if you guys haven't checked that one out already, definitely check out my episode 8 predictions video, one that PM collaborated with me super heavily on. So it's more of our video than my video. And if you haven't seen that, definitely check it out. Awesome stuff, guys. Awesome stuff. Mr. Drummond.
He is too kind. Too kind.
Well, no, it's true. It's super true. A lot of the ideas that I put in the episode 8 preview breakdown video came from you and I both having that discussion. So you deserve just as much credit for that video as I do. Definitely. 100%.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jeremy Eisenfire. He is very kind.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And again, definitely subscribe to PM if you haven't already. The link to her channel is in the description. And yes, Mr. Drummond approved this stream. Well, that is good enough for me. I will take that as a win. And until next time, stay safe out there, guys, in this crazy, crazy severed world. Keep those tinfoil hats on, folks, and we will see all of you on the next one.